Good evening, everybody. I'm calling this meeting back to order. Welcome to the Princeton Council meeting of June 12th, 2017, and please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, we'll be starting our meeting tonight with announcements, and I'd like to start with Heather Howard. Any announcements this evening? Mr. Liverman, any announcements? Mr. Miller, any announcements? Ms. Cromiller? Ms. Butler?
The only announcement was that the pool has been open today from 4, and it will be open again tomorrow from 4 to 8. So thanks to the Rec Commission for making that happen.
I hear happy screams out in the parking lot. So
Yeah, and we know we
word
couldn't
has
find a
gotten
place
out,
to
which is
park.
great. Mr. Quinn?
No.
Okay. I just had a couple announcements. The first is that on Wednesday evening this week at 7 p.m., we're going to have, what time is it?
6:30?
6:30. I'm not going to be late then. We're going to have a meeting from a report from our parking consultants about the study that they've conducted. And is that here in this room, Deanna? Oh, thank you. Here's a flyer. Yes, it'll be here June 14th. There'll be an open house between 5:30 and 6:30, and then the presentation will be at 6:30 p.m. And we encourage everybody to come to that. There was a survey that was out for over a month, I think, online, and we received a lot of great responses to that. So I know there's a lot of interest.
Mayor, can I ask a question about that? I thought we were expecting the results back in August. I thought that was sort of the timeline. So what is it?
This is the second of 3 public meetings. The first public meeting was to just get feedback from the community without the data analysis having taken place.
Right.
This is our second meeting where they will bring back the data that was gathered through their parking utilization counts and surveys and stakeholder meetings. Plus, what they'll do is they'll present big ideas that can be considered, and then they'll be back again in September for a final meeting in which they will more formally put together the recommendations of next steps for the Princeton community to consider on parking.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. And then my second announcement is that the Friends of the Library are going to be having their annual book sale in June this year. Normally they have it in the fall, but they're moving it to June, and that's going to be on June 23rd and 24th. And that's always a great event, great opportunity to purchase books, and just to make sure folks don't miss it this year. Are there any staff announcements? Deanna, no? Okay. So then we'll move on to approval of the minutes. We have 5 sets of minutes for this evening. Is there a motion to approve them in block?
I just had a question about April 19th. I thought we would do them in blocks, so I'll just ask that one. And I apologize for not doing this ahead of time, and it could be the answer is I missed it, but it looks like on April 19th, there's just the presentation, and there isn't, did we not have a discussion, or was there nothing about, April 19th was the 8 a.m. meeting? And so the minutes are just the presentation? Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was on purpose. Okay.
Are there any other questions or comments on the minutes? Is there a motion?
Mayor, actually, I do have an issue. One is a typo on 320. I think I said Woolen Wolf, and it's W-O-O-F, not Wolf, but it's not a substantial change. But on the 320 minutes, we also discussed a number of issues broadly, and then the way they're on the minutes, it shows that it says consensus to approve. And so again, I think it's misleading when we have a work session and then it says consensus to approve on it, because I don't know how you get a consensus sort of without everybody weighing in essentially a vote. And I guess there are 3 or 4 items on the March 20th, and there is a header that says consensus to approve. I've long felt that it's a little confusing when we have work sessions that basically result in a way we're going to move forward, and we don't take a vote, and people don't know that we're going to do that, and yet it's what happens. So the minutes are correct as you've written them, but I think that it's something we should be aware of, be careful of, think about, perhaps for another time. And on the 27th, the minutes for April 27th, 2 planning board members recused. You have them as just sort of left the meeting, but they recused due to conflict of interest. Ms. Gunning and, I don't know how to pronounce his name, the other person who left the meeting. I think we should say that they recused because of conflict of interest, not just that they left the meeting. So now I don't know what you want to do, whether you want to go through them individually or whether you want to sort of approve them in a block as corrected, or...
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes as corrected.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Ms. Krummeller, seconded by Ms. Howard. Any other further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the minutes pass. And next we come to the proclamation for this evening, which is that it's Immigrant Heritage Month in Princeton. And I encourage everybody to read through the proclamation, which I'm not going to do tonight because I know we have a very, very full meeting. And I believe that in reports, Ms. Howard can talk a bit about the meeting this morning and some of the planning work that's going into Welcoming Week. And now we come to the part of our agenda for public comment for items that are not already on the agenda. And we'll start with the sign-up sheet that was on the podium, and then I'll open it up to anybody else who didn't get a chance. And I would ask that you please try to keep your remarks to 3 minutes. And we'll start with Josh Zinder. You can always handhold it to...
Is that all right?
Yeah.
I think that's all right. Hello, my name is Joshua Zinder. I'm an architect with my office on Nassau Street, and I live at 142 Moore Street. I'm here tonight as a business owner and a concerned resident and a member of the Princeton Merchants Association Board. First, I would like to begin by saying thank you to the mayor for the increased dialogue between the town and the merchants over the last year and a half. It has been productive and we believe has helped us resolve and/or diffuse many issues we have faced together. However, I want to call to your attention a crisis that looms large on the horizon for our town. As many of you have noticed, there are many empty storefronts in Princeton. I believe there are 15 downtown and 9 in the Princeton Shopping Center, though I hope the numbers are less. The crisis stems from the difficulty in getting approval for change of use of existing spaces, parking for existing spaces, the historical approval process, the signage approval process. None of this is a surprise to you, I'm sure, and you may have heard all this before. And bricks and mortar retail across the nation is stressed by web-based retail, and locally shops have moved to malls, strip malls, and municipalities that have easier process for approvals. Princeton approvals can take 6 to 8 months and can cost a potential tenant $20,000 to $30,000 in engineering, architecture, and legal fees. This is a huge deterrent to potential tenants. With new developments on the horizon, like the Montgomery Promenade by the Princeton Airport, the North Brunswick Main Street, the Howard Hughes development with 200,000 square feet of retail, we will be in the battle for our lives. Now is the time for Princeton to act and create and promote creative business environment. Right now, we are not competing, we are losing on all fronts. If we do not act, we will be faced with a vacant downtown and neighbors who will be doing Princeton better than Princeton. Modifying ordinances to support retail, service, and food-based businesses should be a top agenda item for the remaining part of this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And it just happens that Ms. Butler, Mr. Miller, and myself met with staff this morning on pretty much that whole list that you mentioned. And we understand the problems that are going on, and we're going to be coming out with a report with a lot of suggestions that are going to address those issues. And, we want to thank the business community for engaging in dialogue with us too. We know that that we have to adapt to a changing climate and make sure that we're still a great place to do business. So thank you. Next is Pascal Chasson. Sorry if I butcher your last name.
Good evening. Yeah, my name is Pascal Chausson. I live on Willow Street. I'm not sure, I don't know if my subject is out of subject or not. We'll see. But it has to do with decommissioning of an old sewer and the release of an easement. So I don't know if the ordinance that we're going to discuss today includes that or not. I hope it does, because it's a very long standing issue. There was an ordinance that was done on 2014-32 that authorized the decommissioning and release of easement of that old sewer, and it has not been done. That's more than 3 years ago. So, I don't know if we're going to discuss it later or not.
Okay. I believe the ordinance tonight is just pertaining to the sidewalk, but did you have any update on the sewer decommissioning?
We have sent over all of the deed information to our municipal attorney's office, and they are working to put together the new deeds that need to be recorded to release those easements off of the affected properties. So it's a process that we're now taking, and I can't give an estimate for the municipal attorneys, but I know they have it and they're working on it.
Can you give us an idea of the timeline? Because it has been going on for more than 3 years.
Well, we just received the documents very recently, but it's a high priority, and we're hoping to get it done, pretty quickly. I can't give you an exact date. It's a colleague of mine who's working on it, but it's something she's working on now and trying to get resolved quickly.
Okay. And it's not linked to this ordinance today?
No, the ordinance on the agenda tonight is pertaining to sidewalks.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
And just, I know there were some confused looks from council. So this was as part of the Park Place, Van Devender, Moore Street project. There was a very, very old sewer line that went, I think, under some properties and needed to be brought out to the street. So this is abandoning the easement that went
it's this
through
one. Yeah.
people's properties.
Yeah, it's between Branch and Moore.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Allison Neely.
Hello, my name is Allison Neely. I live at 224 Clover Lane. I've been a 21-year resident of Princeton, and had children who went through the public schools very happily and successfully. It's a great town. I thank you all for all that you do to make that happen. I'm also a 27-year faculty member of Westminster Conservatory, and as you all know, change is afoot. And I'm here mostly to be sure that everyone understands that over at Westminster there are two organizations, Westminster Choir College and Westminster Conservatory. Westminster Conservatory is our community music school that serves 2,000 students a year and has been in business since 1970 as a division of the Choir College. If the Choir College is sold and unfortunately perhaps relocated, and the property is then redeveloped, we may very well find ourselves at Westminster Conservatory homeless. At that point, we will be very much looking to our community to help us stay and find a place to stay. And I wanted to be sure to come here tonight to ask you all to keep us very much in your thoughts and to keep us in your conversations. Our school systems, as you know, have a great music program, and the leaders in that program, many of them are educated, of course, at Westminster, but the student leaders are educated by the conservatory. And I just really want to be sure that everyone in town understands. Whether they personally haven't been involved, that may be possible, but really we've touched most of you. We start at 18 months, and we have pre-college programs, and then we have adult, a community choir, and a community orchestra, and senior chamber music program. It's a very, very vital part of our community, and I hope that we will be very much in your thoughts at this time. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Excuse me, you wrote the letter to the editor as well?
No, I assisted, but my friend did.
Okay, that was very helpful, and so were your comments tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew Seppin?
Hi, I'm Andy Sutphin. I live at 37 Olden Lane. Before I start, I sent a letter to y'all with a bad mock-up from Photoshop. I just wanted to, if you need a copy, I have more. The reason I'm here this evening is on behalf of the 27 property owners who have signed these individual cards in my neighborhood. And we're respectfully requesting the mayor and council take official action to authorize the posting of traffic signs of either no through traffic or something that meets the manual on uniform traffic control devices on the street signs that exist, along with having a ordinance passed for weight limit of 4 tons sign also placed on an existing street sign at the entrance of Olden Lane. The reason for our request is to alleviate some of the increased traffic that through our neighborhood, which we anticipate will result from the changes in the traffic patterns slated to occur this summer, and that's the reconstruction of the bridge at Worth's Mill on Route 206 and Quaker Road. And essentially, I saw on the agenda, actually the Traffic Safety Committee alerted me that that was on the agenda tonight, that essentially Lover's Lane, the intersection of Olden, Lover's Lane, Mercer Road, and Mercer Street is a 4450 or unlimited wrestling weight. And what they're going to do, or I guess you all are going to do, is change the 5-ton weight limit on Lover's Lane to 4 tons to make it congruent with the other 2 streets. And we're just asking for the same weight limit being ordinance for Olden Lane. And essentially, the immediacy in our presence this evening is because I think Game On is July 1st for the construction. And that's really it. We also just wanted to offer that if there was no budget to pay for the 2 signs, that we would be happy to pay for the signs, and the undersigned property owners on the letter would be happy to contribute to that. And it's our understanding that no municipal ordinance would be needed to authorize installing a no through traffic or no outlet or whatever the proper MUTCD regulation signs would be. We'll leave that to the experts. So if that could happen sooner rather than later, because clearly there's an immediacy that needs to do that. And we were hoping that possibly you could do that before an ordinance was passed, since this is a time of the essence issue. And just wanted to thank you for your action to help preserve the peace and safety and character of our Princeton neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I just had a question before you get down. Is that actually a no-through street?
Well, you can't get there from here, and that is basically, a lot of folks think you can get to Route 1, and that seems to be, since I walk
Well,
around.
no, I understand this, but it's not a dead end, right? I mean, I don't think we could legally put a sign that says no through traffic.
Or no outlet or something.
Right,
Just
because I don't
use-
think, I wanted to just say, just clarify that, because it would give you an easy answer right now. I mean, I think I don't know what the load limit is for the
It's
trucks.
unlimited, zero right
But
now.
it seems like, to me, that we can't put a no-through.
Well, there's
We
no
don't
out-
usually do that anyway as a policy.
There's no outlet. If you drive to the end of Olden, it dead ends after the Crossroads Nursery School, and there's a circle. And
But
then
you can turn right and go somewhere else. I mean, it's not actually a no outlet, right?
I'll leave it to the experts. You know,
Okay.
Clearly, the idea here is that I think people using Waze or Garmin or TomTom have erroneous information from what I've been able to, people ask me, how the hell do you get to Route 1? And then I tell them.
Yeah.
I go up to Alexander Street and so forth. But basically, yeah, there's that aspect. And then also during the construction phase, which I guess is slated for about 4 months or so, that last year, if that's a guide, when they repaved Alexander Road, people tried to cheat through the neighborhood, the shortcut doing that. And I have a feeling that will happen again. And just as an aside, that intersection holds the county record for destroyed traffic lights. It's been pulled down 12 times since it was turned over to the county, and along with the traffic lights come our electric lines and our cable and FiOS and all that good stuff. So it's kind of, it would be nice if we had some sort of thing that kind of alerted truckers that, you know, yeah, to your right, it's 4 tons, to your left, it's soon to be 4 tons, and straight on, it's 4 tons, and our street's unlimited.
So one reason I was asking about this is because I've gotten another request from someone else about asking for a sign and a change in the traffic pattern because of the 206, and I haven't forwarded it to the Traffic Safety Committee yet, but we've gone through this before. I haven't been through a major project like this before as a council person, and I was wondering, do we put signs up, like maybe in this case, I would say a temporary sign that says, can't get through to Route 1, if that turns out to be, if lots of people are doing that? I mean, because I was thinking is there a problem with waiting and seeing where the problems are and then addressing them as they arise? I mean, since we can't really predict what's going to happen. This is in answer to another question that I got. Or what's the usual way of dealing with these major disruptions?
And then, Deanna, do you want to answer that? And then, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So depending on the severity and the length of work and what each individual condition is, we may take a wait-and-see approach. For this neighborhood in particular, because we've had these concerns over
Years.
an extended time and the issue with the traffic signal, I think we are looking to do some sort of a permanent installation. We just need to look at the guidebooks and find what is an approved sign that can address the situation. If there's nothing that solves the issue for the short term, I think we can look at using a temporary type warning sign for the duration of the construction. But we'll definitely address it in their case, and depending on the situation at other locations, sometimes we do take that wait-and-see approach.
Thank you.
Okay, thank
And
you.
I just want to take this opportunity to remind everybody, and I don't know if, Deanna, you have more details about this under reports, but that 206 is going to be closed for the bulk of the summer with the replacement of the bridges over the Stony Brook, and that work is expected to start in early July 7th, July 6th, and we are expecting major traffic issues because of that. So try to put it on your calendar and remember so you don't get trapped there in early July. The work is going to have extended work hours so that DOT can come in and be as efficient as possible and hopefully get the work done before too much of fall goes by. But given we're going to have a meeting on June 26th, I think is our next meeting, can we have a report on that just so it's hopefully some of the press will pick it up and everybody on council will be informed in terms of what's going on, what we can expect in terms of the traffic detours and what outreach we've done. That would be great if we could get a fuller report on the 26th. All right, is there anybody else who wanted to speak on an item not already on the agenda? Come on up, and if you could please state your name and your address. And then when you're done speaking, there's a piece of yellow legal pad there. If you could just put your name on and your address so we get it correct for the minutes too. Thank you.
Hendricks Davis, 232 John Street. I've been a resident here for 34 years. It'll be exactly 34 years tomorrow when I closed on my property with the help of the Witherspoon Jackson Development Corporation at 232 John Street 34 years ago. I'm here again to speak about a property that I see every day from across the street, the Mary Moss Playground, which I should say the former Mary Moss Playground. There is no existing representation that a playground was there. I'd ask you all, when was the last time you walked down John Street or Clay Street? Was it a while ago? Yesterday, good for you. You saw that there are now 2 huge vacant lots right there at that intersection. One is the former Mary Moss Playground, and the other is the passageway from John Street to Stanworth Properties. It's still my belief that the council is verging on making a big mistake and missing a big opportunity to have a win-win-win and perhaps more wins for the community by continuing in your efforts to establish a playground where many people tried to preserve it for its historic value, and now that's gone, but where many of those same people now believe that affordable housing should be built. You're on the verge of making a big mistake, especially since there's the opportunity, I believe, through being agile and creative and perhaps cooperating with the university. If you insist that there is a need for a playground/park, to actually build housing on the former playground site and return that property to the tax rolls and build a playground in the pass-through site. It's so obvious to me. There's even more space across the street for a enhanced or expanded playground/park if you can get the cooperation of the university to participate in that. And indeed, I believe most of the children that will use, the toddlers that will use that playground will come from that side of the street. That's great. We want it. I know you all are tired of hearing me say this. I can see it on some of your faces, but it needs to be said, especially in light of the litigation that you're going through now to establish the amount of affordable housing that you will build in this community. We need affordable housing. Yes, we do need parks and playgrounds. Yes, the Witherspoon Jackson community has a great one right down the street. So you're already into this proposition by $1 million. Is that not correct? You spent $535,000 to acquire the property from Mr. Barsky, who had paid only $335,000 for it 2 years before, and you spent $500,000, correct me if I'm wrong, on your planning for this. And the bids shovels have not even gone into the ground because the bids have not gone out yet for this proposal. All is not lost, even with that expenditure. You can transfer knowledge. You can transfer design from one location to another. You can do that. If you insist that there is this need for it, transfer that design and that knowledge across the street. Get the university to cooperate with you because it will benefit them as well. Their space is wide open, just as wide open as the former Mary Moss Playground is. Somebody asked the question of the university, would you help us out here? We can do a lot of good for a lot of people and build affordable housing for sale, in my opinion, to mixed income, affordable, 60% or more affordable, and the rest could be market, as far as I'm concerned, to help pay for it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've said this before, but the council went through many meetings, I think it was a couple years now, and decided to move forward with the project at the Mary Moss Playground site for renovation there, which the rec department is working with engineering on that. And we've also been working with Habitat for Humanity to create affordable housing on a portion of the site as well. But no, thank you. Yeah, no, I appreciate your comments. Welcome to the microphone.
Hey, my name is Glenn Schultz. I live at 84 Wheatsheaf on Harry's Brook. I'm a little concerned about the zoning variances. There was some relatively new construction on my street, and when I came to a zoning meeting, they were instantly granted a zoning variance because, and this is approximately a quote, houses are getting bigger, that's just a fact. But every time a house gets bigger, there's less permeable surface for the rainwater, so it sheets off and ends up going through my yard, along with my neighbor's lawn furniture, that kind of thing. So I'm wondering if there's any kind of a plan to enforce the zoning ordinances that already exist, because they seem to be a little loose.
Yeah, so that's a big question. So one, there's one of the ordinances on the agenda tonight you might want to stick around for is for stormwater regulation and tightening up what's required when you add on to your property to help mitigate for the runoff that extra development would create. There's going to be a public hearing on that in, I don't know, probably around half hour, 45 minutes or so. And then in terms of the zoning, there's a group that includes myself, Ms. Crumiller and Mr. Quinn, looking at neighborhood zoning and neighborhood character and our zoning ordinance on the books, and whether the zoning ordinances reflect what's built in the neighborhoods and whether they reflect our values and whether they reflect the kinds of buildings that neighbors are expecting to go up in their neighborhood. And you can read, there's just an initial report that was released today that's up online at the municipal website that you can take a look at, and we'll be following up with potential ordinance recommendations for changing. Just in full disclosure, we're not looking at reducing FAR blanket across the board, but we have been looking at things that will change how FAR is calculated. FAR is floor area ratio, which is essentially how large a building is allowed to get. And so for a long time, garages, for example, weren't included in that calculation. Now they are. We're looking at other possible ways to look at what incentives might be in there that are incentivizing behavior that don't necessarily match what neighborhoods want. So I encourage you to take a look at that report, and we welcome your feedback and other ideas on it.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
And there's also a website for that effort called princetonneighborhoods.org.
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak to anything that's not already on tonight's agenda? Okay, seeing no one, I'll close public comment, and we'll move on to reports. And our first report tonight is on the paramedic program, and I'd like to invite up James Buzin, who's the Director of Emergency Services at Capital Health, who'll be talking to us about some of the ambulances that they're staging here in Princeton.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Thank you for inviting me. Try and give a quick overview of EMS as we know it. I appreciate the opportunity to do a little education. It's something that is probably the most misunderstood of emergency services. And I think a quick overview, a little better?
I need to do it too. Speak right into your mic, please.
How about like this? Won't have to struggle with it. Okay, so again, appreciate the opportunity to come give a quick overview of emergency services. As a reminder, Capital Health has been running the paramedic program or the mobile intensive care unit for 40 years now. I know somebody very close who's been there the whole time, so I'm a good historian to the program. And we have served all of Mercer County in a volunteer aspect many, many years ago. And eventually the hospital had it as under the hospital, and it became a employed service when the volunteers went away. We are now relocating our unit back into Princeton. We'll be going back over to Hook and Ladder. I'm glad to say that that's in days as opposed to weeks or months. We just have a few last details that we're trying to work out. A quick overview of EMS as we know it is that EMS is a 4-tier service. We get to you faster than anybody. We beat the police and we beat the firemen. And the reason I say that is the first leg of EMS is the 911 dispatch. They actually can give instructions over the phone and help somebody who's having a medical emergency. So the first person that you deal with in EMS is the dispatcher, followed by the first responders. And again, in Princeton, we have a great relationship for as long as I've been here, and it's since the beginning. The Princeton Police and at times Fire have come out as first responders and taken care of our patients before we're even started because they were in front of the house or they were the first ones there. And they render some basic care. Next, we have the basic life support service, the Princeton First Aid Squad, Princeton First Aid and Rescue Squad, which has been doing this just as long. That's where the paramedics started under. And the EMTs on that agency now can do more for patients than they ever could. When I started in this business, everything that an EMT can do now could only be done by a paramedic. Skills such as defibrillation, giving Narcan, giving certain medications. So working closely with the members of the squads from around the county and the other medic units throughout the State Department of Health OEMS has really changed a lot of that, and they can do a great deal of work now. And then the final phase, that is the EMTs from their first aid squad. The final part, or the fourth phase, is the paramedic unit. And the paramedics are allowed to administer medications. They are allowed to do advanced airway control. We can take care of certain trauma emergencies. And one of the most important things we do is we ring the bell. So my paramedics work for every hospital. They work for every town, they work for every hospital, so I don't have any special loyalty to Capital Health that I don't have to St. Francis or Hamilton or Somerset, Princeton, because we need to take care of where the patient wants to go. So it's very important that people understand that although we are a service that augments the first aid squad, we work for the patient. That's really the only one we serve. And what we do is we basically will deal with a patient when they're having a critical or life-threatening emergency. We do not respond when someone has a fracture. We do not respond when someone has general illness. Our criteria is based by dispatch cards, so we are sent by that 911 dispatcher who will interrogate the caller. They'll send us if it's deemed life-threatening. Otherwise, they would simply send the squad if it was for a ride. And then at that time, when we begin assessing the patient, we can do a more comprehensive assessment, and we can do a recognition of something that I call ringing the bell. Many times when a person is having a heart attack, we call it a STEMI. We have the ability to interpret an EKG, and we can say, that's an active heart attack happening right now. We notify the hospital we're taking the patient to. They bring the cath lab in on our command. So we basically ring the bell, if you will, and we start the process because it's very time sensitive. And now that holds very true for stroke. Stroke is going to be talked about more than MI now, but it's catching up. It's very similar to heart attack or MI. And what's happening with stroke is you want to give the patient a medication, a lytic, that breaks the clot up as quickly as you possibly can. And time is everything for a stroke. I've seen patients who were unable to speak, unable to move, treated quickly enough, walk out of the hospital a few days later, walk out of the hospital, and they were destined for a nursing home or death. So the technology is improving, but you have to get to it fast enough. So by working all these systems together and by partnering with our EMS agencies and working as a cohesive team, we're having much better outcomes than we ever did. The last thing that we're involved with now is we actually started a mobile stroke unit. You may have seen it. It's been up here several times for demonstrations, but we actually have an ambulance now, and it's one of 8 in the United States that has a CAT scan on board. And that unit can do a quick CAT scan, which determines that there's no bleeding going on. If there's no bleeding, they can then administer a thrombolytic and resolve the stroke in front of somebody's house. The only thing I tell people is, when's the last time you saw an ambulance parked in front of somebody's house for 45 minutes? Don't get too upset by that, but we actually have somebody standing outside to say, it's okay, it's because it's, we've always taken patients to the hospital. So that's kind of a quick overview, and I just thought if I could answer any questions. When I was younger, I didn't need notes, but I was trying to make sure I covered the information that would at least tell you what we're doing. Our unit will be stationed in the firehouse within days, as I mentioned. And can I answer any questions for you?
Thank you. Ms. Howard?
I'll just thank you for coming in. I think we wanted to brief the public because people will start to see capital around town and to understand that this is really exciting for the residents of Princeton, and it's a wonderful complement to the great work that PFARS is doing.
Mm-hmm.
This will give this capacity to deal with these really critical cases, but it's not a substitute for, is really a complement to all
Correct.
the other
It is
great
a
work that's
complement,
happening.
exactly
So for
right.
people to understand that, and I think you approached us, that came to the Board of Health because that location in part is also so
Right.
good for being able to dispatch, right?
It is. That's correct.
Being basically at Harrison and Nassau. So I think it's exciting and it's good to know. I think for all of us, it's good to know that we have this added level of service.
Right. And we're back. We're not, new to it. We're back. I was here when we started many, many years ago. Obviously, the paramedics ran out of the first aid squad. I was telling Frank, I was stationed in the school across the street when I was a young paramedic. We were in where the bus drivers were for many years, and then we were in the hospital. And then when they shut the 2 units down to 1, we put it in the center of 571, if you will, into Princeton Junction. But now we have the 2 units again, so we have a unit in Hightstown. We're moving it back into Princeton.
Yeah, thank you so much. So just a little, it's not kind of technical, but are the members, do they stay here in town? Do they live in town? The employees?
The employees, so we have a rotation that we set up, so they're all employees of Capital Health, but they work on all of our units. And they cover this territory now, even though they're not stationed here, but now they'll actually be in the town. So the employees basically are required to know the whole county because we can have this unit respond to Hamilton Township. It's not uncommon that we have to use units to cross the territory. The paramedics cover the whole county, and pardon me, we mutual aid the other counties as well, and they back us up.
And just for the public's knowledge here, I guess the billing for this service is done through insurances? So,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So, and I never have a problem talking about it here because this is the place to talk about it. I don't ever want to talk about it during a call. I don't let my crews talk about it. That can't happen. That's going to scare somebody away from care. But probably the most important thing that people need to understand is that for a starter, one of the populations we worry about more than anything is our senior citizens. Our senior citizens covered by Medicare have a very flat fixed rate, so you could bill anything you want. This is all that's going to happen. And that rate is, the base rate probably is about $400 to $500 maximum. So that's it. And the hospital runs charity care just like everybody else does. I never have to worry about people being pursued into hardship with bills. They're very good with that, and I'm the one that takes care of them. And I get a call every once in a while. It's not that it never happens, but they work with people, and it's just a service we don't want people to be afraid of. That would be catastrophic. So we work with everybody that we can.
Are there any other questions? Ms. Cormeller?
So are the ambulances, they're there 24/7?
They will be there 24/7, yes. So again, this unit had been stationed at Princeton Junction Firehouse. That unit will now be, if you think about it, they're at Princeton Junction, we have another one in East Windsor by Hightstown. So they're kind of that side of the county. It's better to have them split back up so that we have better coverage, better triangulation, if you will.
So so the territory for these 2 ambulances is the county, Mercer County?
We
or is
have 5 to 6 trucks covering the county. It'll
I
be
see.
stationed here. It could be sent to a call in Trenton. It could be sent to a call in Hightstown. We cross-cover the whole county. So the paramedic units are a regional response unit. And we work with every BLS, basic life support agency. So we've worked closely with Princeton. Frank and I have worked together for over 30 years. So it's been here the whole time. It's just we're moving the truck back into town is the change right now.
Anybody else have a comment? No. Oh, yep, Mr. Miller.
Thank you for coming out and explaining the service to the people who are here, the people who are watching on television, and hopefully through the press to people who aren't either watching or aren't here this evening. I think it's important. It is an important augmentation, as you called it, to the service provided by the First Aid and Rescue Squad, and will be of great value to the residents of Princeton. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be back. I was here from that time, so it's good to be back.
All right, that was well said, Bernie. Thank you. And thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a great night.
So we'll continue with reports. Ms. Howard, any reports?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And to sort of to complement the resolution we did earlier, I want to report that a broad cross-section of members of the community met today to start planning for Welcoming Week this fall. And want to thank the library for hosting the planning meeting and Human Services Department for working with the library to plan that meeting. And we had folks from a number of local nonprofits and obviously municipal employees there talking about what we can do to plan to have an even better Welcoming Week this fall than we did last year. Some of you will recall that last year was the first year we did that as part of our involvement in Welcoming America. And our goal, again, is to highlight and celebrate the diversity that makes our community so great, and also our welcoming approach. That will be September 15th through the 24th, and we discussed some interesting ideas, including perhaps being able to host a naturalization ceremony during that period. Would be really exciting to be able to do that in town. And then a lot more informal activities like potlucks and partnerships and cultural exchanges, and a great way to highlight. Some of you also may remember that last year in the newspaper we highlighted many immigrant business owners who contribute to the community, and that was really exciting, and I think there's more we could do on that front. So that week is coming up September 15th to the 24th, and we'll be looking for as many people as who want to be involved, and I think we all felt an increased need to be taking these steps. Just also quick reports on the human services front. The Summer Youth Employment Program is getting geared up. That 42 local youth will be working in jobs for the municipalities and local nonprofits starting on July 5th. So that's really exciting, and you may recall that we received a grant from the Princeton Area Community Foundation to fund their stipends. So that's really exciting. So we'll be seeing more young people around, which will be great. And finally, more good news on the health front, and Mayor, I think we owe you and Jeff thank you on this, is that Princeton Hospital has agreed to expand transportation in town. Currently, there was sort of a radius inside which they were providing free transportation for people to doctor's appointments, and they've expanded that radius to now include Reading Circle, which is really exciting. So transportation for people living in Reading Circle to the hospital clinic to doctor's appointments will be covered. So we thank the Princeton Hospital and thank the folks here. Thank you.
Heather, could I ask you a quick question? Who, 8th grade civics, who performs naturalization ceremonies?
Sometimes, I mean, it varies, and there's somebody from the federal I forget the exact name of the agency that does it, but then often mayors, senators, other elected officials, judges. Mayor, have you ever done any?
I did. There was one at the university maybe a month ago that President Eisgruber officiated, and I was there and spoke, and it was an incredibly moving ceremony. It was really great.
So
they were interested in coming back to Princeton to do
you
another
have to
one.
coordinate with the federal officials, but it sounds like they're very open to do it. And as luck would have it, Citizenship Day falls in that week, so I think we can get them.
Yeah, Mayor, I don't know. I know I've been with you guys more than I have my own wife. I mean, there's so many meetings, so I don't know what you guys are going to comment on it at all. But just briefly, the Youth Advisory Committee, we finished our interviews for the next round for our youth, and we've decided to pick 4 young 10th graders to participate this year. And second, the Youth Advisory, they just finished what we call a mental forum at the library, and I heard it was pretty well attended with the award-winning doctor to speak to the youth in regard to their mental status. So that program went off without a hitch. So that's about it. Thank you.
Mr. Miller?
A couple of brief reports. First of all, I think most of you are aware that we have a Citizens Finance Advisory Committee, which is a volunteer committee with liaison from the council. And the Citizens Finance Advisory Committee met this morning, and at that meeting, Councilman Quinn suggested the possibility of a forum sometime this fall to be conducted by the Citizens Finance Advisory Committee that would be hosted by the public library. The purpose of the meeting would be to explain to the public how the municipal budget is put together, the sources of revenue, and how the funds are spent. The forum would provide an opportunity for the audience to ask questions concerning the municipal budget process, the budget, and the role and guidance provided to the municipality by the advisory committee. The possibility of inviting the Princeton Public Schools, who consume about half of your tax dollar, and the county, who consume about 28% of your tax dollar, to provide similar information, and an opportunity for discussion of their budgets was also discussed, but it was concluded that an initial forum should focus on the municipality. And I'd like to thank Councilman Quinn for his suggestion, and my colleague, Ms. Butler, who was also at the meeting and was involved in the discussion that led to this report. Secondly, our Shade Tree Commission has been quite active this spring. In past years, the Shade Tree Commission celebrated Arbor Day at one elementary school per year and rotated that around. This year, the Shade Tree Commission and the arborist held Arbor Day events at 5 Princeton elementary schools. The arborist and the commission participated in the Little Brook School Science Fair. The arborist and the Public Works Department planted 55 trees in the municipal right-of-way for the 2017 spring planting. And the commission, working with the arborist and with staff, completed, and the municipality submitted a grant request to the state for a grant of $30,000 for the replacement of ash trees that have been or will be lost to the emerald ash borer. And finally, Princeton is participating in an experimental U.S. Department of Agriculture program using a test area in our Mountain Lakes Preserve involving the release of parasitic wasps that prey on the emerald ash borer larvae, and in so doing interrupt the ash borer reproduction cycle. And I want to emphasize, when I say parasitic wasps, that these are minuscule insects. They are not a hazard to humans, but they feed on the larvae. And if this is done in a relatively confined, the purpose of the test is to prove whether or not a wasp release program works in a relatively confined area. We don't believe that it would be effective, for example, to try and release wasps throughout the town to interrupt the emerald ash borer problem. But in a confined area, and there are very few of these test programs going on. We are one of them. And in a confined area, it may prove to be effective. Thank you.
Thanks. Ms. Carmiller?
Yeah, I have two things. For the, I wanted, after serving as the acting chair of the Public Transit Committee for, I think, almost 2 years, although I'm not sure exactly, we now have a real chair of that committee. It's Faye Ryder, so it's very exciting for me and everyone else on the committee. And we're getting some new members, as I think you guys have appointed a new member to the Complete Streets Committee, and we're getting some people. So that committee is going strong, and I wanted to let you know that. The other thing I don't know if all the council members, I think some people fell for the phishing test that our IT Director Bob McQueen set out, and some people didn't, but I just wanted to let you know that there was a phishing test. And, it said something like, look at this Google Doc, and I wanted to let you know if you some people didn't fall for it. So if you didn't fall for it, you might have thought, what is this? And you never knew that it was a phishing test. But some people did fall for it, and then it says this is part of a training program, and it's part of a training program that Bob McQueen has undertaken with employees to protect our system.
Ms. Butler?
Yes, I just want to announce again that the pool will be open tomorrow night from 4 to 8 again, but then not again until the following week, I think.
Wednesday, the 14th.
Wednesday, the 14th, thank you. That's when it opens full-time. We did, thankfully, we've had some summer weather, so we had about 500 people, 500 new memberships over the weekend. I think we had 4,000 visitors. That is critical to our little economic development that we do over there. We also hosted the Special Needs Barbecue on June 2nd. That was well attended, and just such a nice event. That's the last event for the season for them. We've had Blue Curtain. Lance, you'll be happy to know this. We're going to have a concert July 15th, CP North. It's reggae artist, Mystic Bowie. So get ready. They're free concerts, open to all, 7 p.m. And we also completed hiring about 171 employees for the summer. So that's quite an undertaking to staff the pool. And most of those people are local, and so that's all money that stays in our little local economy.
Mr. Quinn?
Thank you, Mayor. The Civil Rights Commission had a special meeting on May 26th when Princeton Public Schools Superintendent Steve Cochran gave a presentation about the district's racial literacy efforts and shared information with the commission that many members of the public have asked about, disciplinary data related to minority students, and information about minority staff recruitment. You'll recall that this meeting was in response to the April Commission meeting when students of color from Princeton Public Schools came to the Commission to talk about overall school climate issues and several well-publicized events of racism in the public schools. Mr. Cochran took questions from the commissioners and listened to comments from the students and the public. The commissioners offered their assistance as the district expands its racial literacy initiative in a way that's consistent with the commission's charge to educate the community about issues of race and discrimination. So it was a very helpful and productive dialogue between the commission and Mr. Cochran, and the schools followed up with an event last Wednesday. So, this is a long time coming that progress is being made.
Do you want to mention the Not in Our Town also? I forgot.
Yes, and yesterday, Councilman Liverman and Councilwoman Butler and I had the pleasure of attending the Unity Awards sponsored by Not in Our Town, where they gave awards to kids who are really making a difference on some of the issues that the Commission and Not in Our Town and other groups are working on with regard to race, not only in the schools but in the community. So again, we you know, we still have a lot of work to do in this town, but I think that we're making progress and that there's a lot of energy and a lot of positive energy around change right now. And finally, I have a piece of housekeeping related to the Princeton Environmental Commission, and I'd like council's input on this. In 2016, PEC worked on an ordinance regulating the installation of residential electric vehicle charging stations. Due to the transition of the council liaison to me, this ordinance was not included in council's goals, and when it was referred to Trishka, it turned out to be a little more complicated than anticipated. So Trishka Lisolo and I have met with members of the commission, and we're looking for council's guidance on whether you'd like to add this to our 2017 goals or hold it for 2018. And I didn't invite Trishka to offer any comments or her perspective on. I didn't want to authorize a lot of legal expense on without council's full knowledge and approval.
Yeah, I think what was put together, there's just a lot of different components of it. Some of it we have to research to see if it's, you know, these are provisions that may or may not be preempted. Some are land use, some aren't really. It's not necessarily the sort of thing where, we're not talking weeks of work, but there's enough here that it's, you know, Lee and I would both have to set other things aside to devote attention to this, and so it's certainly something that I can work on in lulls, of which there don't seem to be very many these days. But, you know, in speaking with Councilman Quinn, we're very happy to put focus and attention on this, but there are so many things on your list of priorities, and we as staff can't make the decision to prioritize this over other things that are on your goals and priorities for this year, which is, I think, why we're bringing it to you now.
And I just want to make sure I understand what it is. So this is if you want to install an EV charging station and you don't have a garage or a carport? Because
It's
if you
for all
have,
sorts of things. No, it's even if you do have a garage and a carport, I think it applies to residential and to non-residential. There are a lot of different parts to it.
because a lot of people have EV
Yes.
charging stations right now, so are those,
So why do we need this, I guess?
yeah.
You'd have to put that to the Environmental Commission. I know that was one of the questions that Lee had in terms of certainly some of these, there's no issue under the zoning. I think part of it, I mean, I'll let Councilman Quinn jump in, but from what I took from our meeting, I think some of this is to bring awareness and probably to try to encourage the use of these charging stations and the use of electric vehicles.
So I did, with everyone's consent, invite Sophie Glovier up to speak. I saw her raise her hand. I know it's not a public comment session, but she could add more
As the chair of the
information.
PEC.
She's the chair of the Princeton Environmental Commission.
Yeah, Sophie Glovier, 68 Driggs Corner Road. The impetus for the development of this ordinance really came through Sustainable Jersey. This was part of the actions we were considering to get the EV-friendly town points for Sustainable Jersey. And so we commenced work on this, and what we found, which Sustainable Jersey hadn't understood, was that there are a lot of New Jersey-specific building code, other issues that other states don't have. And so Sustainable Jersey was encouraging this to be done, but it was a little premature. So we did some good groundwork in terms of best-in-class ordinances across the country, but it really needs somebody New Jersey-specific to go through it. So, and the points were not required, as I understand it, to for the submission to recertify through Sustainable Jersey. So we thought it would make sense to put it off.
Okay, well, that sounds like maybe it's not quite ripe for this year, and I mean, I think we just want to have our ears to the ground, and if people are wanting to install EV charging stations or feel like they can't get an electric vehicle because we don't have ordinances in place, then I think we should definitely take it up and revisit it. But if we're spending a lot of time solving a problem we don't feel like we have at the moment, then I'd say let's let's wait, focus on other things, and
Sure.
Go for that.
I just, in bringing this up, two reasons. One, to get a sense of whether it was 2017 or 2018, but really to ensure that it doesn't get lost in the wash again. In the transition this year, it clearly fell between the cracks, and if council's feeling is that it's more appropriate for 2018, then I'm fine with that, and I can't speak for the commission, but I don't think there'd be too much objection to that. And I'd also, while we're on the subject of EV, remind my colleagues that tomorrow at 4:30, Wednesday at 4:30, I'm sorry, in Spring Street Garage, we're having the ribbon cutting for the EV dedicated parking spaces. So I hope to see all of you there.
Great, thank you. I have two art-related reports. The first is that the new parklet is up and open, and it's outside of Jazam's. The theme this year is Energy Playground, and it's a really creative space. It's a collaboration between the Arts Council, engineers and architects at the university, Jazam's, local architect Joseph Weiss, and it's a beautiful space, and I think it's going to be fun for kids. There's also these stationary bikes that are really fun, so you get and you pedal. It's all about energy, so they have some windmills, they have solar panels, but you can get on the bikes, and if you pedal fast enough, it's like one of those strongman thing where like you bang the mallet on the thing and you try to make all the lights go up. So you have to ride pretty fast. But I did it in the skirt and I made it go all the way up. I was proud of myself, so you can do it too. And then the other is that I want to also thank the Arts Council for helping to bring public art in front of Avalon Bay. And I see Daniel Harris almost in the front row here tonight, and he was part of a citizens group that also helped bring that to fruition. So if you didn't see it on your way in, I encourage you to go up Witherspoon at the end of the meeting. The sculpture is called Einstein's Brain, and it's by Patrick Strzelecki. And I think that it's great to have public art, and I want to thank Avalon Bay and the Arts Council and everybody who helped bring it to town. All right, and with that, are there any staff reports? No? Okay. Then we will move on to our ordinance public hearings, and the first ordinance public hearing is 2017-26, an ordinance by Princeton canceling special assessments for the reconstruction or installation of sidewalks along Moore Street, Park Place, Van Dievener Avenue, Willow Street, and authorizing the cost of said improvements as a general improvement. And this ordinance comes as a result of a change in policy from the council to pay 100% for sidewalks. We used to split it 50-50 with residents, and it's part of our complete streets policy. So are there any questions
Mayor,
from council?
I'm sorry, Mayor, I just want the record to reflect that I've recused
Oh,
myself.
right, okay, yep, thank you. Are there any questions or comments from council before we open up the public hearing? Okay, in that case, I'd like to open up the public hearing. Is there anybody who'd like to speak on this ordinance? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and ask if there's a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mr. Miller, seconded by Ms. Krummeller. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Crummiller?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
No.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
And Ms. Butler, did you want to state your reasons for voting no for the record?
Sure, if we'd had comment, I would have done that. It's just that this law went into effect after we had done the work. We did the work. The residents knew the work was going to be done. They knew that they'd be responsible for it. It enhances their property, and it came in under budget, and I just think this is, I think that they should pay. They thought they were going to have to pay and expected to pay, and the law went in effect after this work had been done.
Okay. Thank you, but the ordinance passes by a vote of 5-1. Next is ordinance 2017-27, an ordinance by Princeton canceling special assessments for the reconstruction or installation of sidewalks along Poe Road and Edge Hill Street, and authorizing the cost of said improvements as a general improvement. This is similar to the previous ordinance, but on different streets. Are there any questions or comments from council before we open up the public hearing? Seeing none, I'll open up the public hearing on this ordinance. Is there anybody who'd like to speak to it?
I am interested in Councilwoman Butler's comments, and is there any way to make this retroactive to like about 19?
Precisely.
Really? No, I think there is a sense here that I could probably point to where residents in the poorest neighborhood, Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood, were encouraged, taxed, had to pay, and I guess those were less, the town was not as in the green as it is now, but it does seem a little bit out of balance that you're putting this through now when it's not really benefiting a broader group, and that perhaps residents should be encouraged to participate in that program. So I read this and I was like, what? Yeah, that's nice that we can do that, but is that really the best use of the resources of the town? Again.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak as part of the public hearing? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back to council. Is there any further discussion from council?
Well, I just wanted to be clear that everyone going forward, this was a change in policy, and we had to we had to decide at some point where to draw the line, and there was a difference about when that was with Ms. Butler and the rest of the council. And so, but it's going to apply to everyone going forward, and anyone with old sidewalks right now, especially, is probably could possibly benefit very soon. But whenever we do sidewalks from now on, the municipality is going to pay, and this was part, regardless of anything. And the reason that we did that is that we wanted to help sidewalks get built rather than discourage them, which although that wasn't the purpose of it, but it had been a lot harder to build sidewalks and now it will be, and we're trying to be more walkable. So.
You want to make a motion?
I would like to make a motion.
To approve the ordinance.
To improve the ordinance.
Okay, so it's been moved by Ms. Kremiller and seconded by Mr. Miller. Any other further comment?
Yeah, I'll just comment that there's a bit of history here. And that is, if you go back about 10 or 11 years, the taxpayer was asked to pay 75% of the cost of sidewalks. And there's been an increasing recognition on the part of the governing bodies, both in the former borough and in the former township and now in the municipality, that the sidewalks are used by everyone, and not just the people who live immediately adjacent to the sidewalks. And as a result of that, over that period of time, the cost of installing or upgrading sidewalks has gone from being borne by the abutting taxpayer to the municipality as part of the general tax fund.
Thank you.
And with that, I second.
All right. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Ms. Krummiller?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
No.
Mr. Quinn.
Yes.
And that ordinance also passes 5-1. Next, we come to ordinance 2017-28, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton concerning the Complete Streets Committee and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974. And this is a slight restructuring of the committee just to facilitate a quorum and other issues.
I'd like to make a motion to pass it.
Well, we have to
Oh, do we
hold
have to
the
have
public
public
hearing.
comment? Okay.
Yes. So I'd like to open up the public hearing for this ordinance. And seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Did you want to make a motion to approve?
Approve?
Second.
Second.
And it's been seconded by Ms. Butler. Any comments? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Yes. Ms. Crum Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn.
Yes.
And the ordinance passes unanimously. Next is 2017-29, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton designating bus stop locations and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974. And this is really a house cleaning ordinance to make a list of where all the bus stops are, so we have that officially. Is there any questions or comments from council? I'd like to open up the public hearing on this ordinance. Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Oh, I'll close the public hearing,
Sorry.
and then, yeah, Ms. Butler, do you have a comment?
I had a question for the engineer. Currently, there's a bus stop at 206 and Stockton, and there's one proposed for Monument and Stockton. And will that be in addition to the one at Library, or you'll be moving the one at Library?
The current ordinance before you only indicates the existing bus stop locations. Every year, we endeavor to install 5 bus shelters with New Jersey Transit at our most popular transit stops. The stop that you've talked about at Library and 206 is one of our more heavily used stops. Unfortunately, because of the right-of-way and the built condition in that area, it's not very easy to put in a bus shelter. So one of the considerations we are looking at is potentially moving that bus stop towards the driveway at 1 Monument Drive at the Monument Hall building. But we're going to do a survey of the ridership to determine if that is more or less convenient for them. So no decision has been made on that move yet.
And so this ordinance doesn't impact that in any way? There's no decision?
Correct.
Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Moved by Ms. Butler, seconded by Ms. Crumiller. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms.
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Yes. Ms. Crum Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn.
Yes.
And the ordinance passes unanimously. And next we come to 2017-30, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton regulating stormwater management and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. And before we start on this, can I just get a show of hands of who was hoping to speak on this ordinance? Okay. Okay, so we'll start with if Jack, you wanted to
You want a quick overview?
Quick overview again. We'll have questions if there's any questions from council. Just so everyone's clear what we're discussing. Then we'll open up the public hearing. We'll close the public hearing and then bring the discussion back to council.
We started this process about a year ago, and the purpose was to harmonize the former township and former borough stormwater ordinances. We came up with a draft, submitted it to PEC. PEC then worked with Stony Brook Millstone Watershed, and over the past year, we've been working together to come up with an ordinance that we felt that met everybody's needs and some of the concerns that PEC had. So basically, there's 4 components to it. The first is redefining the definition of a minor subdivision, redefining the definition of a major subdivision, harmonizing the definition of impervious surface, and creating a permit, a yearly permit for inspection of any stormwater system with a major subdivision. So the first part of it is the minor development. In the borough, it was very simple. If you increased your impervious coverage by more than 400 square feet, you were considered a major development and had to provide stormwater management. Township was a little bit different. They actually had a table with percentages. If you were under the percentages and didn't impact the neighboring property, you didn't have to provide any stormwater management. And they also had a threshold of 500 square feet. So basically, the proposed ordinance is we went with the 400 square feet as the threshold. We took away any discretion. So it's basically, as soon as you exceed the 400 square feet, you will have to provide stormwater management. We came up with a formula so you wouldn't have to hire an engineer to do the stormwater calculations. It's basically for every square foot over 400, you have to provide 2 gallons of storage. And that stormwater management could be through dry wells, rain gardens, any number of things. We're trying to encourage rain gardens. They haven't been real popular so far, but we have a few of them in town that seem to be working fine. The next part is major development. Both the borough and township had a 1 acre threshold for a major development and a 1/4 acre of new impervious. Basically, we're cutting that in half to be a 1/2 acre of disturbance, and 5,000 square feet of new impervious would trigger a major application. The next part of it is the definition of impervious surface. The borough basically included porous pavement, decks, obviously sidewalks and asphalt, roofs, all as impervious. The township was a little bit less. So what we decided to do is go with the borough definition, but we also added pools. Neither the township or borough considered a pool to be impervious. So we felt that basically just to try to limit the amount of development and the amount of trees that have to come down on a property, that a pool should be considered impervious. Because actually it is. You're not getting any recharge in a pool. The last change is basically to put in where you have to have a yearly permit. The fee would be $50. And to start, we're only doing it for major developments. So basically, there's an application they have to fill out. Each year, they have to submit a report just outlining the maintenance of their system that they're required to do. They have to submit a maintenance manual. So this basically just enforces that they have to submit a report saying that they've maintained their stormwater management system. Essentially, that's the short version of the changes. Anybody has any questions? Or?
Okay. Are there any questions before we open up the public hearing? Yeah, Ms. Howard?
Sorry, hey, Jack, something I probably should have asked earlier in the process. How much work is this adding for you in your shop?
Part of it, well, the issue would be the inspections, which we're actually obligated to do regardless as part of our stormwater permit with the state. So it's work that we should be doing regardless. Obviously, there's a little bit more.
But you have to review the plans are submitted, right?
We have to review that anyway. For the single-family home, this actually makes it a little bit simpler. We're not reviewing somebody's calculations. It's a simple, for each square foot, it's 2 gallons. So that part of it makes it a little bit simpler. And hopefully, we've actually been working with Access Princeton to make it so the notifying people that they have to submit this permit is automatic. So we're hoping that won't create too much more work. We decided initially to leave it with the major developments and not include the single-family homes. That would be a lot more work, and we figured, let's see how this goes, and then maybe we'll go to the next step.
Ms. Carmiller?
Well, are you also working with IT? Because I know we're expanding our use of seamless docs, and can we use, do you think we can do this electronically?
Yeah, we believe you can, yes.
That's great.
Nope. Okay. All right. So thank you. I think we're going to open up public comment now, and we're going to start with the folks who signed up ahead of the time on the sheet, and then we'll open it up to anybody else who'd like to speak. So we'll start. Oh, all right. Yeah, I'll just call everybody. If you can just line up at the mic so we can hear from all of you. in a more efficient manner. So Josh Zinder, Jim Waltman, Mike Pizarro, and Daniel Harris. Oh, and I reminded that to ask you if you can please keep your comments to 3 minutes.
And maybe move the iPad so people can see how they're doing.
Or you could speak in whatever order you want.
Madam Mayor, members of council, thank you very much. I support Ordinance 2017-30, particularly in light of leadership at the top in temporary withdrawal from the Paris Accords. We must all do as much as possible to support sustainability at the local and regional level. We must minimize the pollution of our waters and thus the health of our entire ecosystem, including us. Let's credit the leadership of the Stony Brook Millstone Watershed Association, the PEC, and I understand the engineering department, as Jack West has said, for providing much assistance. There is an additional assistance to this ordinance, if I understand, and that is that the ordinance, with its constraints on impervious surface per acre, will partly control the size of buildings placed on lots of various sizes. That is to say, the upward ascent of McMansions and comparable. These new outsized buildings, 1 bathroom per child, as one builder told me a year or so ago. The astronomical prices for these homes shows that Princeton is at the hub of a market that is being made not by buyers and sellers, but by brokers and builders. Another way of saying this is simply to note that Princeton cannot aim for diversity, nor the social sustainability of its population, if the size of houses, and thus their affordability, is not controlled. We pride ourselves on diversity as well as sustainability that comes with communal interaction, particularly in the face of leadership at the national level and its failure. But I think we must wonder whether we really have that kind of sustainability. I urge Princeton Council to pass this ordinance, but, as Mr. West has said, with the understanding that it is an essential move towards a further improvement, one that reduces the threshold definition of major development and copes with the retroactive problem of teardowns, which should be subject to the same constraints as those proposed in the current ordinance. A Phase 2 ordinance should also emphasize the primary importance of non-structural techniques for the management of stormwater green infrastructure. I don't know what's happening to my body. It's very disturbing to me. You can see it as I feel it. A Phase 2 ordinance should also emphasize the primary importance of non-structural techniques for the management of stormwater green infrastructure, rain gardens that flank driveways, driveways of gravel rather than asphalt, and the benefits of new and existing trees as filters for the purification of groundwater, storage for carbon monoxide, and shade for increasing heat. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel.
Hello. Hello again, my name is Joshua Zinder. I live at 142 Moore Street, and I consider myself an environmentalist, and I'm a LEED accredited professional through the U.S. Green Buildings Council. And despite all this, in looking at the ordinance, however, I believe there are still conflicts, ambiguity, and missed opportunities within the ordinance as it stands now. You have made the path to stormwater management easy. Drop in a plastic retention basin in the ground and you're done. It is a big, costly strategy for small projects. This is really not a sustainable strategy for the environment or our town. You define impervious coverage and list porous pavement as impervious, and then list porous pavement as a sustainable strategy. This is a cyclical type of mindset that has created this ordinance, which is not sustainable for our community and puts a financial burden on the homeowner. I was asked after the previous meeting, when this ordinance was introduced, how we could incentivize sustainable practice. Well, how about providing tax relief for a homeowner who installs green roofs, rain gardens, or similar instead of these retention basins is a way for a homeowner at least to have the ability to offset some of their costs. It is not a new thing. There are a myriad of grants and incentives available to municipalities and large corporate entities for this type of thing, but not for individual homeowners. Maybe the PEC, Sustainable Princeton, or the Watershed can offer residential grants. It seems to me that this ordinance is a way for the municipality to pass their issues off onto the private tax-paying homeowner. In the end, it will not resolve the stormwater issues we have here in town on Spring Street and Harry's Brook, which require a comprehensive plan. In addition, the inspection of these water retention installations and green infrastructure will cause additional man-hours for inspections and will stress an already pressured municipal staff. And if there will be no inspections, what is the incentive to maintain these structures per the ordinance? This ordinance is another case of providing a blanket ordinance across our town, which is made up of neighborhoods, different densities, scales, and impervious coverage. Witherspoon-Jackson is not the same as Riverside. This ordinance is all stick and no carrot. We should be progressive and incentivize sustainable strategies and provide opportunities for homeowners to improve their homes, our neighborhoods, and not punish taxpayers with undue restrictions for issues that we are unwilling to confront as a municipality. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jim Waltman. I'm the Executive Director of the Stony Brook Millstone Watershed Association. And Mayor Limpert and members of the Town Council, we very much appreciate the time you've invested in this issue, and I appreciate the chance to talk to you tonight. So we're pleased to lend our strong support to this ordinance. This is a very important step that the town is taking, understanding that there are additional steps that can be made to strengthen the ordinance, and additional steps, as the previous speaker has suggested, to work through voluntary means with residents and businesses. Stormwater runoff is the #1 cause of water pollution and flooding. We know this to be true, and if we believe the consensus of climate scientists, unfortunately these issues will only get worse moving forward. Now this ordinance it's been said already, the product of many, many months of work and research, and we're grateful to your staff, Mr. West and Deanna Stockton, and very grateful for our partnership with Princeton Environmental Commission. The measure takes, as I said, the important steps that need to be taken, hybridizing the two ordinances, taking the best of the two, and adding some additional provisions. However, there are additional steps that we look forward to working with you on. The leading one of these, of course, is this issue of redevelopment. So Princeton is a mature community where much of your impervious cover was laid down long before we knew that stormwater was a problem and long before there were any regulation of the issues. What we're proposing in a second phase, when the opportunity arises, when existing developments are redeveloped, is simply to bring these developments into compliance with the stormwater system that's applied to all the newer developments in town. We happen to agree with the previous speaker that inspections are critical. We strongly support your first step towards this, to requiring the major developers to self-report on an annual basis. We look forward and are prepared to help make this, make sure this is implemented in a cost-effective way, and hope that over time this will be applied to additional projects. So the last thing I want to say is that, of course, this is not just an issue for the people in Princeton. It's an issue for the people that live downstream from Princeton. And I've gotten to know the mayor of Manville Borough pretty well the last few months, Mayor Richard Onoderko. And he wanted to just make a short statement, and I will leave this for you. It's just an email, but his final thought: Princeton's efforts to help set stricter requirements to further reduce stormwater runoff from new development are commendable. Hopefully, Princeton's mayor and council will be the change agents others can follow to help lower floodwater levels across central New Jersey. Manville, of course, is to our north, and we have this wonderful river, the Millstone, if you didn't know, flows from the south to the north. So it is downstream, and it is suffering from the results of all of the development in several dozen towns that are upstream. So you're taking a step today to not just make Princeton a more sustainable and sounder town, you're going to start helping the towns that live downstream from you as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My name is Mike Pissarro. I'm the Policy Director for the Watershed, and I want to echo what Jim just said. I can't thank the Council, Mayor Lempert, Jack and Deanna enough for your efforts over the last several months in getting us to this point. And the PEC has been invaluable. Jim talked about, and we've talked about multiple times, the problems. There's flooding and there's a water quality issue. You know, we set out in 1972 to solve water quality. We're not there yet. And the reason we're not there yet is because of stormwater. That is, as Jim mentioned, and as the science will tell you, the most significant cause. And where is that coming from? It's coming from all of our properties. You know, whether intentioned or not, we are adding to the pollution of our society. We're adding to that flooding. And this ordinance helps capture more water on site and helps treat more water on site. So less is flowing down to your neighbors, less is flowing into Lake Carnegie and other places. It's moving, this ordinance is moving in the same direction as many in this country to decentralizing our stormwater management, not these giant basins and large pipes to move it off the property as fast as possible, but to keep it on site. I was at a meeting at DEP today to talk about that issue. How do we create more incentives? How do we get more decentralization of our stormwater management? And that's what this ordinance, by reducing the major triggers and creating this minor development, does. Decentralizes, putting the solution at the source of the problem, not somewhere downstream. And just lastly, as Jack mentioned, there's always been a requirement to maintain these systems. The new MS4, the Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System permit, that permit that DEP issues to the municipalities to discharge the stormwater, is going to have a requirement that municipalities shall develop, update, and implement a program to ensure adequate long-term cleaning, operation, and maintenance. And that's what that annual reporting, that annual permit does. And so I thank, again, the council and mayor and professionals. We urge you to adopt it, and we, the Watershed, stand committed to helping us implement it, to educate, and move forward in that step, in that phase 2. So thank you.
Sophie Glovier, 68 Drake's Corner Road. I'm here representing the Princeton Environmental Commission. I want to thank the staff and all of you. We've spent a lot of time on developing this ordinance over the past year. We've really tried to reach out and meet with different members of the community, architects, builders, really try and get everybody's input and wrap it up into what was best for our town. We strongly support this ordinance, and we urge you to adopt it. We are very committed to educating around this issue. Holding stormwater on your property is something not a lot of people know about, and we're collaborating with Sustainable Princeton, the Watershed, and the library. We'll be holding programs about green infrastructure, making people aware of resources that they can use to do this themselves or to hire professionals to do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Kip Cherry, 24 Dempsey. I support the ordinance greatly, but I don't think it goes far enough.
And I just want to bring that to your attention because small projects can create a lot of stormwater for the neighbors. And I think that it would be a good idea to have a maintenance plan for those small projects because the swales or the dry wells, whatever the solution might be that is being implemented, does need maintenance. And if it's not maintained, then the whole thing falls apart. And the neighbors then will be inundated at one time or another with stormwater. And so I think it should go further. That doesn't necessarily mean that there should be an inspection. I think if people voluntarily filed their maintenance plans with the Public Works Department, that people then could go in and see whether they're following their plan or bring to their attention that it's time to do some maintenance on their dry well and protect themselves from some major problems. I have a dry well on one side, I have swales on the other, and I have no way of knowing whether the dry well is ever going to be maintained. I doubt that it is because the first owners of the dry well have already left and been replaced by someone else who probably has no idea that there's a dry well. So if you don't have any kind of public documentation, then, you know, the neighbors are going to be hit at one point or another, and it's going to be bad. I already lost my furnace once before, and I would like to not do that again or have whoever takes my house down the road have that experience. So I think that this is really important. And also, of course, it keeps the stormwater on the property if you maintain it because it sinks into the groundwater on the property rather than going off into the public stormwater system. So I really think it should go further than it is. And I also want to bring up the issue about houses that have been put on higher grading than was the previous grading for the lot. I know that Jack is working on that and there will be something coming down the pike, but we still have a big problem with that. You would think by now people would have learned. If they have not, we still see new houses going up or additions going up, raised way up in the sky, either from excavating soil on the property or from bringing in soil. So I don't understand why we're letting these things get away. I think we have to really make sure and monitor the foundations to make sure that they're not way on some kind of a plateau and not wait for the whole thing to be built and then realize, gee, they must have brought in some fill. I think we're missing some opportunities here, and you all know there are a number of poster childs around town that illustrate this problem. Thank you.
Wendy Mager, 459 Cherry Hill Road. I do want to thank the council, the staff, the watershed, and the Environmental Commission for their work on this ordinance, which I support. As an environmentalist and the president of Friends of Princeton Open Space, the impact of stormwater runoff on water quality is of great concern to us. There are many streams in our local parks and open spaces that are affected by not having stormwater ordinances that are broad enough in their reach. So I think this is a great step forward. And I also want to echo Daniel's point that because there seems to be less interest at the federal level in protecting the environment, I think an approach that involves citizens individually is a good one for our times. Lastly, I just want to note that we do have a rain garden at Mountain Lakes Preserve. It channels the stormwater from the driveway surface and that runs across the front of the house and keeps it, filters it so that it doesn't run right down into Mountain Lake, which is a good thing. And I want to note that the Environmental Committee of the Garden Club of Princeton is going to have a speaker on rain gardens this fall, and we'd be happy to work with the Environmental Commission and the town to see about ways to make citizens more aware of how they can implement that strategy. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Katya Luxem. I live at 151 Taylor Court. And
I'm sorry, can you say your name slower just so I make sure it gets in the minutes?
It's Katya Luxem, and I live at 151 Taylor Court, which is part of the Lakeside Housing Complex. And I just want to say I really support these ordinances. I'm a pretty new resident to New Jersey, and I think one of the things that I noticed really quickly was that the water's pretty dirty. And water's kind of my pet issue in my research and in my free time. And so I'm really thrilled that you guys have put so much thought and effort, along with the Engineering Division and the Environmental Commission and the Stony Brook Millstone Watershed Association. I really hope that you also go strong in the second phase. I personally live right next to a rain garden, and it's really beautiful. It's a bit of an open space, so that means I get lots of sunlight in my windows. I think it's something that people can get used to having in their yards very, very easily. And yeah, so thank you very much, and I hope you keep strong in this issue.
Tina Cutzio, 79 Dempsey Avenue. I want to thank everybody who's been working on this ordinance for making our town more resilient to whatever is coming at us from climate change. So having said that, I know I'm a bit late at this point to bring this up, but I'm wondering if there's any way that you can encourage collaboration between neighbors and between neighborhoods, because as the atmosphere is our commons, stormwater is also kind of common. And as Mr. Waldman will tell you, one man's runoff is another man's flood. For instance, there's a neighborhood between Walnut Lane and Ewing Street that is a local low. And no matter what those people are going to do in terms of swales and rain gardens, my runoff is going to end up in their yard. So it would be great if we could, tackle this problem not on a house-by-house basis, but more on a neighborhood kind of basis. I have a second issue, not to second-guess anybody, but the 2 gallons per square feet of storage space that you are requiring, correct me if I'm wrong, but that I did a quick calculation, and I think that amounts to about 4 inches of water coming down from the sky. And I am wondering if that is, I'm looking at Mr. Waldman, if that is a reasonable amount. I mean, we know that, North Carolina got 1,000-year floods like 3 years in a row. And so did those numbers get updated, and is that part of this ordinance?
Yeah, why don't we we'll leave that question in the air for right now. I just want to see if there's any other public comment, and then we can have Mr. Waldman come up, and if is there anybody else who'd like to speak to this? Okay, Jim, why don't you come up, and if you just answer that, and then if there's nobody else, we'll close public comment.
So it's an excellent question, and the that amount equates to about a 2-year storm. So yes, we're going to get bigger rains than that, and there's going to be more flooding, which is why every town needs to not only have a strong ordinance like this one, but also have other approaches and other strategies. And as we've spoken about before, we have a grant from DEP that to date has supported mostly planning on our sides, but to try to identify some regional stormwater solutions, like you were suggesting, within neighborhoods. I dare say, and I should probably say this and run out of the room, but one of the areas that kind of springs to mind is the Choir College, which is a large area. That neighborhood does flood, but the town needs to look, and we'd love to work with you. We have GIS folks looking at this very carefully to identify places that could treat a large amount of stormwater to address these larger storms than happen just every couple of years. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, yep, okay. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak to this ordinance as part of the public hearing? Okay, I'm going to close public comment and then bring the conversation back to council. and see where, yep, Ms. Butler, do you want to start off?
Sure, I have a couple questions. Jack, can you talk, someone raised the issue of people building properties up on raised property, you know, where they fill in,
Mounding.
but didn't we address that in an ordinance? The
no.
former borough, okay, we talked about it as part of the
We
neighborhood
have some
character.
thoughts as to how you can do it, and it's a complicated process. We do try to monitor that and try to limit how much people raise their house. And some of the examples that you've seen in a lot of the presentations lately is the one on,
Franklin.
drawing a blank, on...
Franklin?
Yeah, on Franklin. That's way up there. That house was actually, the grade was raised only a foot and a half.
Thank you, grade.
But why it looks so much higher is because the house is so much bigger, one. Two is it was a one-story house prior, now it's 2 stories, and the finished floor is a little bit higher. But the amount of fill that was brought in for that was only a foot and a half.
Well,
But because the house is closer to the street, obviously the grade looks a lot steeper, where before it was gradual, now it's a lot steeper. So it's...
Okay, well, we did talk about that, and there is an ordinance in the former borough, is there not? One of the
It's
towns.
4 feet, so you
Okay,
could bring
well,
4 feet to fill in, so
we
obviously
do
that
need to-
is much more than anybody has
Okay,
done
that's
to
not-
date. So we do try to look at that. It's difficult when somebody's building a big house. From an engineering perspective, you want the house higher to make the grading work around the house, so you're not flooding the house. We do take steps to make sure that we're not flooding the neighbors. But it's something that we have a draft ordinance that, you know, we think will work. It's just a matter of, you know, getting it to move forward.
And every one of these housing applications that you review, you do review it with the neighbors in mind. It really isn't just a solitary review of that
100%
application.
that we're making sure that it's as best possible, we're not impacting the neighbors.
And finally, I guess I just want to say that this has taken an enormous amount of time, and thanks to you and to Deanna, but also to everyone on council. I know we all met individually, we met in groups, we've heard multiple presentations. Jenny said to me, I think this is the 6th time I've heard this presentation. And we're all very supportive of it. I do hope that the re-education, we are committed to that, that if, you know, we're going out there. There has been a big change, and in the thinking about getting stormwater, you know, in the old days, about 5 years ago, we might have thought that you would want to get the stormwater off your property as quickly as possible, and now, you know, there's a different goal in mind. And so I hope you are committed, and it would be great if we saw you back in Princeton sometime soon with that. And just related to that, this morning in our CFAC meeting, it did we were having a conversation about the invasive species, and you mentioned that maybe 100 people turned out for a program on invasive species. So I don't know if you were there, Wendy, but that's really a good thing. I do think there's an appetite in Princeton for some of these changes. So we look forward to seeing you back here soon.
Mr. Quinn?
Sure. I echo Ms. Butler's sentiment about this was really a model for advocacy on an issue well executed by the watershed, and I think they're to be commended. And I look forward to working with the watershed PEC and our professionals on part 2 of this, which is a bit of a heavier lift, the question of redevelopment, which will be very important as our town grows. But I think that we can pause and say well done to all, assuming that we have the votes to pass this.
Do you have any timetable on the redevelopment portion of this?
As soon as you tell me you want it done. No, I mean, we're talking over the next couple of months, I would guess.
Good.
But again, it's prioritizing which ordinance we do next.
Well, I do think we felt it was a priority, but we did recognize that, you know, certainly staff has a lot of demands on their time, but in the early fall, is that a couple of months?
Yep.
Ms. Howard?
I just want to add my thanks to staff and the citizen volunteers for whom this has been a big project, and I appreciate folks' patience in schooling me in some of these issues, so I'm looking forward to enacting it.
Is there anybody else? No, I just want to also just convey my thanks. I know that there were a lot of individual meetings and a lot of hard work that went into this, so I want to thank everybody, including the staff. And I think we heard from many of the speakers, but I just wanted to reiterate this point that, you know, this can be an expense to homeowners and to builders who want to put in an expansion, but I think it's important to take a step back and realize that when there is a big storm, someone's going to pay. And what this ordinance tries to do or attempts to do is to make that more equitable so that as we go on in time, we're building that infrastructure to hold the stormwater so that there is going to be some investment up front for that, but in the long run, we'll have fewer destroyed furnaces, less property damage, and we'll be saving as a community. So with that, is there a motion to approve?
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Miller and seconded by Ms. Crummiller. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Yes. Ms. Crummiller?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
And the ordinance passes unanimously. Thank you very much, everybody. Okay, I would just ask if you're leaving the meeting now, you're welcome to leave. You don't have to stay here, but if you could take your conversation all the way out into the hallway and close the doors, just because we have to continue with our meeting tonight. Thank you. All right, the next ordinance is 2017-30, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton regulating stormwater management and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, did I just read the ordinance we just passed?
Just did that.
Sorry. 2017-31, an ordinance appropriating $982,000 from the sewer connection fees for various improvements in and by Princeton in the county of Mercer, New Jersey. Before I open up the public hearing, are there any questions about this ordinance? No? All right. I'd like to open up the public hearing for this ordinance. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Crummiller and seconded by Mr. Quinn. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Yes. Ms. Crummiller?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
And this ordinance passes unanimously. Next is ordinance 2017-32, bond ordinance providing for various improvements in and by Princeton in the county of Mercer, New Jersey, appropriating $1,515,000 therefore, and authorizing the issuance of $1,515,000 bonds or notes of Princeton to finance the cost thereof. Are there any questions from council before I open up the public hearing? I'd like to open up the public hearing on this ordinance. Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to council. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Crummiller, seconded by Ms. Butler. Any further discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Yes. Ms. Crummiller?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
And the ordinance passes unanimously. Next is 2017-33, bond ordinance providing for various improvements to the parking utility in and by Princeton in the county of Mercer, New Jersey, appropriating $115,000 therefore, and authorizing the issuance of $115,000 bonds or notes of Princeton to finance the cost thereof. Are there any questions from council? I'd like to open up the public hearing on this ordinance. Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to council. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Crummiller, seconded by Ms. Butler.
Ms.
Madam
Howard?
Clerk, please call the
Ye-
roll.
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Yes. Ms. Crummiller?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
This ordinance passes unanimously. Next is 2017-35, an ordinance by Princeton authorizing the acceptance of a conservation easement for a portion of Block 4301, Lot 3 on the Princeton tax map, which is the Copperwood property. Are there any questions from council?
I'm sorry, I missed the introduction of this. Can we get an explanation briefly? And I'm just sort of curious why this wasn't done when it was built.
It was
I'm
definitely
sorry.
part of the planning board approval. But I don't know if there's anyone on staff who could explain the timing.
It's the Copperwood easement.
No, I'm trying to recall, there was a reason why we didn't want to do it sooner, but I have to apologize.
That's
the
all right.
specific
I don't think it's a
details
big
are
deal.
escaping me. There was, I can't remember if there was something the developer needed to do before we could take the easement. There was some funkiness, but in any event, whatever it was, obviously.
Cleared up. Okay, that's fine. It's not a big deal.
Okay. I'd like to open up the public hearing for this ordinance. Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and see if there's a motion to approve.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Krummeller, seconded by Mr. Liverman. And Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Yes. Ms. Crummiller?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
And the ordinance passes unanimously. Next is 2017-36, an ordinance by Princeton accepting the donation of vacant real property located at 224 Cherry Valley Road and designated as Block 601, Lot 2 on the Princeton tax maps. Any questions from council before I open up the public hearing?
Yes, again, I apologize because I was absent on the introduction of this, I believe. But why couldn't this be worked out the other, in sort of the way we had first hoped, that the New Jersey Conservation Foundation, why couldn't they take it?
Well, I'm hoping they can. I'm predicating my support for it on.
No.
Well, they're not right now, but they haven't said, does it?
Yeah.
Did I miss something?
No, I think that they tried, we went to them, we tried to work it out with the New Jersey Conservation Foundation, and for whatever reason, they couldn't do it, and then now it's coming back to us. We had turned it down once, I thought. It's just,
Right, but now, instead of them giving it to the New Jersey Conservation, we could now give it to them, correct?
That's correct. Lucille Davy in my office did reach out to them this afternoon. She's just waiting for a call back. But for whatever reason, the Chins and the New Jersey Conservation Foundation weren't able to work anything out, and I think
it's
that
their estate, correct? Is it an estate?
I don't, frankly, I don't know if there was miscommunication, what was going on, but they weren't able to reach any kind of agreement with the New Jersey Conservation Foundation. In the meantime, we need part of that property for the road widening, and we would have had to pay the Chins the value of the easement, plus probably file a condemnation action. Instead, they were still willing to donate the property to Princeton, and then there's a state statute that in turn would enable Princeton to donate the property to the New Jersey Conservation Foundation or some other open space organization if the New Jersey Conservation Foundation won't take it. As I said, Lucille reached out this afternoon. She unfortunately did not hear back in time for tonight's hearing, so I can't make a representation one way or the other.
Right, but there is consensus on the council that we want to do that,
Right, in other words, donate.
That we want to donate, we're going to accept this now.
Well, donate what you're not using. For
Right,
the
but we will
road
try to
widening.
donate it because of my opposition to
That's correct.
orphan properties.
That's correct. Yes, and that's still, between my office and engineering, that's what we're going to be working on. But unfortunately, we just don't have the time to get all that sorted. We need the easement
So
right now.
it is
Right.
possible, though, that we end up with
Yes,
it.
and I'm hoping that it will happen. I mean, I'm
No,
assuming.
it's possible we end up with it. If
Oh,
for
it
some
is
reason,
possible.
whatever-
Yes,
It is
that
possible.
possibility exists.
But
Definitely.
it is the
I think
estate.
everyone has agreed that we're going to do our best.
Okay.
But at least this way you get the easement for free.
Okay, I'd like to open up the public hearing for this ordinance. And seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Are there any more discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Does somebody?
I'm
I
sorry.
move it.
No, we
So
have to
moved.
move it first.
So
Thank
moved.
you.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Liverman, seconded by Ms. Howard, and then Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Crum Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
And the ordinance passes unanimously. And next we come to our ordinance introductions for this evening. The first is 2017-37, bond ordinance providing for various capital improvements in and by Princeton and the County of Mercer, New Jersey, appropriating $6,562,590, therefore, and authorizing the issuance of $5,980,180 bonds or notes of Princeton to finance part of the cost thereof. We'll see. Sandy Webb is here if there's any questions from council on this ordinance.
I have some questions. So this is basically our capital, this encapsulates our capital budget,
Correct. This,
but we didn't, we have.
these are,
With the exception that we bifurcated it and we pulled out the library
Yeah, I see that.
expenditures.
I see that. But we have not passed the capital budget yet, correct?
yes, this is the process. We passed capital budget with.
With the ordinance.
With the ordinances.
Okay.
So we did the first part, we did the parking, the sewer ordinances. We couldn't do these ordinances in the last meeting because of a quorum issue. So they were back and we bifurcated the two
Got it.
ordinances.
But I thought there was some question when we were looking at the capital budget in a different form about some of the smaller items that were on there and whether or not we really wanted to bond for those. I think the issue was raised at CFAC.
The issue was raised, and as we have done in the past, and I think the response was, we have $200,000 in cash capital each year that usually takes care of the majority of those small items.
Okay, so they don't appear to be, that's what I was wondering. I don't see them on here listed as separate items
They're
anymore.
not separate.
Okay, you've just going to put those in the cash capital. Okay.
Ms. Cron?
I just have a question. I just noticed that the word organic is used a couple times, for dump trucks and infrastructure, and I wondered what that means. I mean, right now, we contract out all our services that have to do with organic compost, right? Or
Hold on one second.
it's on E and F.
Oops.
Again, it's a small thing. If you don't know, it doesn't matter. I just was mildly curious about why that word is there, because as far as I know, we only have a composting program that we contract out
Do you know,
for.
Sandy? I'm not sure.
Could it be organic matter like leaves and lawn?
Maybe.
Or that may just be, I think that was just a title we used in terms of the,
In terms of the
Organization.
department.
Yes.
So bond council combines like types of projects together. And so when I put this list together, this was under the Infrastructure and Operations Department, and it included streets and roads, garbage, and organics, meaning like parks, things like that. It was just the terminology that Bob Huff used when he put together his original request.
Okay. I mean, I think it might give a false impression that we're investing in organic something, but I don't care.
No, it's really just identifying the department.
Mark, the
Butler?
other, I'm sorry, can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
The other issue was the Clearview properties that Bernie had raised the issue that we didn't want to have them in here, and they're not in here, correct?
that's correct.
For this, and so even though we're introducing this, we can introduce that at a later time, or are we?
We can, we put this together so that there, if we needed to, we could introduce them another time this year and stay within our debt limit. So they're part of the plan, but we didn't introduce them. If we don't need them, we won't introduce them this year.
Okay.
Okay. I'd like to open it up and see, did you have another question? Was there any questions from council? All right, I'd like to open it up, see if there's any questions or comments from the public. Okay, is there a motion to introduce?
So moved. Oh, second.
It's been moved by Mr. Miller and seconded by Ms. Krummeller. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Yes. Ms. Crummiller?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
In the next one, yes. So the ordinance has been introduced, and the public hearing will be on June 26, 2017.
Mayor, I'll be leaving the dais for the introduction.
Okay, so for this next ordinance, both Mr. Miller and Mr. Quinn have informed me that they're going to be recusing themselves because of their relationship to the library. This is ordinance 2017-38, bond ordinance providing for various improvements to the library in and by Princeton in the county of Mercer, New Jersey, appropriating $275,000, therefore, and authorizing the issuance of $261,500 bonds or notes of Princeton to finance part of the cost thereof. Are there any questions or comments from council on this ordinance? Ms. Butler?
Question about this. I don't see the same kind of breakout on this that we had on the other one. Am I missing that? And I guess what I'm really wondering about is whether this still includes the $150,000 worth of surveillance equipment.
It does. It's just written out differently. If you go to section 3A, it's written in the paragraph, so it's hard to see. Where
Oh, expecting me to read the
and
whole
it is still
thing.
included.
I'm sorry, it's section 3A, did you say?
Yes.
You know, so I'd raised some concern about the purchase of surveillance equipment and was hoping that there could be some conversations and maybe between our legal and police. We had a preliminary sort of incomplete conversation, in my opinion, in our finance committee meeting. I would say I have concerns about investing in more surveillance equipment until we have done more legal research on what we're going to do with it. I spoke briefly to Chief Sutter about the subject. I don't want to say this is his official position, but he did express some concern about having youth on videotaping young people, and I don't support the purchase of that surveillance equipment. I don't think that, you know, I've had questions about this, I've expressed them, they haven't been answered, and so I'm going to vote against this.
Well, can I just say that we do this now. This is nothing different than what we're doing now. All this is just getting better, you're getting better imaging, better equipment at the library. But we do it now. We've been doing it for years. There's nothing different. We're not changing the way we do anything here. We also do it at other locations, like the pool.
But do we do it in?
We do it all different public spots.
Indoors? I mean, I share.
This municipal building is.
Yeah, we do it in the garage. We do
Right.
it in this building. We do
Just
it.
this room.
We do it in this building.
The
in the hallway.
hallways are.
All the hallways. I mean, we
Right,
do
but
it-
not, I share Joe's concern. I wondered if, I mean, I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but I'd like to understand why we have library users under surveillance. It just, it doesn't, it feels a little weird to me. I understand that we did it already, but I didn't know that.
Yeah, I don't look at it as under surveillance.
Well, it is.
I mean,
You are. If
because
you have cameras on you, you could, in theory, you could have videos of people taking a book out on something, or it just raises concerns because I don't really understand what we're. Is there a big problem with that?
I think it's a safety issue.
Yeah.
But can you? I would like to know what the safety issue is.
Well, we discussed it at the Public Safety Committee, and we talked about how when you're in a public place, which includes the library, municipal building, the pool, you don't have a reasonable expectation of privacy. It's not like obviously being in someone's home, which is where we have those serious issues and why we've still struggled with the issue of body-worn cameras, for example. When a police officer responds to a domestic violence complaint and comes into a home, you have a reasonable expectation of privacy, and it raises all those issues. Here, the issue is that it's long established that when you're in public places, you don't have that reasonable expectation, and my understanding is that, they've been, as Lance said, there have been cameras there for years. This is just an upgrade to better technology, perhaps. I think we should ask Brett, who's here, perhaps because of the second floor upgrade, I don't know, but when we discussed it at Public Safety, the chief said that it has been useful with some items being stolen, like laptops, and it's been helpful to have, to have evidence to be able to go when there have been stolen items. But I would recommend, I certainly, so I think, we felt comfortable on the legal issue. Certainly, we have been doing it and felt okay, but I think, it's certainly, I'd love to hear what the library director says, just so we can understand more about how it's used.
And Lance, I appreciate that they have been doing it, but as Jenny said, I was not aware of it. Subsequently, we've had several issues regarding surveillance camera, and I think there are legal obligations that we have not been fully explored about once that tape exists, who has access to it, is it operable, who we're surveilling and for what purpose, for petty crime. And I understand this, Heather, I think you make a good point about the right to privacy. I do think it's kind of ironic that the library, of all places, has protected personal freedom and what you can see online, and they've been a staunch supporter, rightly so, I think, of access to all sorts of material that from time to time people have wanted to limit on public computers, et cetera. And so, I'm just really now aware of it, and I apologize. I've been involved with the library. I'm a supporter of the library. I've been involved for years. But the more I think about it, I guess I've just evolved in my thinking about the surveillance, given particularly our history, and I don't think we should have.
It's funny because the more I think about it, the more I'm opposite. My kids go to the library all the time, and I'm worried about safety. Now, I'm sorry, I'm just telling you, we live in a different country today than we did years ago. You can look at what's happening all over, from child abductions to whatever else may be out there. So for me to have surveillance and to worry about what the book my daughter is taking out or whatever, I would rather have the safety of knowing that my daughter is there, and that, God forbid, anything happens, we have a way of tracking or tracing.
But this is what I want to know. Is it really improving safety? Because is there someone looking at, is there someone monitoring it? Because if not, you're just talking about catching the bad guy after something bad happens.
After the fact.
You're not really talking about safety in the moment. Is someone, I just had these same questions, not that I'm opposed to it,
Right.
but I would like to know, and it is also a big expense, and I know that the expense is not just the capital expense.
Yeah.
It's also somebody doing something with the tapes.
Storage.
And maintaining the cameras and installing them. There's a lot of expense involved. So I just would like some justification for it beyond, especially when I have never heard of any crime. Maybe I'm just not up on what's going on.
What came up?
Before we continue to speculate, maybe we can have Brett come up, and I know the cameras have been there for many years. I don't even know if these are the first cameras that we'd be replacing.
Yeah, so the cameras that we would be replacing are the cameras on the first and third floor, which are closed-circuit television cameras, and they're 14 years old. We did install the cameras that we're proposing to add to the first and third floors on the second floor as part of the renovation. So we do already have the cameras that are in the budget installed in the library. In terms of privacy, it does my heart good to hear you talk about the library as a champion of privacy. That's something that we are always trying to put out there, that we oppose censorship, that as soon as you return a book to the library, we destroy the record of your ever having borrowed it. That we absolutely value privacy. We try to position the cameras in a way that provide for the greatest amount of security, physical security for the people in the building, but also the intellectual freedom for the people who are actually doing research in the library or reading for pleasure or doing the kinds of activities that we hope to promote. Our understanding, and having researched the issue, you brought this up previously, about is it operable, it does appear that it is not operable. That's the latest findings that we've seen and that have just come out in the last month or so as reaffirmed. And I think we would probably have a very different position if we felt that this would be open to just anyone. Our understanding is that it would be solely for the security of the people in the building. We have a building monitor, at least one building monitor, on site at all times, and we do have 3 floors, almost 60,000 square feet. They don't just sit there in front of the monitors, they walk around the building. but we are able to take advantage of their being able to look at the cameras, the new cameras that would be installed from elsewhere in the building that could carry, I mean, we don't necessarily propose they're carrying around an iPad, but that would be an option for them with the new cameras that are IP-based to actually be able to put eyes on multiple different areas. So again, there's a very, very low incidence of crime, theft, et cetera, in the library. But we do have 800 to 850,000 people come through the doors every year. And even if it's just a nominal percentage of, 0.00 or whatever, there are issues that do arise, and the cameras have proved valuable in helping to enforce the code of conduct and in helping to make sure that people's property and their children are secure in the library, which is of the utmost importance. It's a public space. It's perhaps the most trafficked public space in Princeton, and we want to make sure that it's always physically secure, as well as a place that does promote intellectual freedom. And this does seem to strike the right balance to us.
Ms. Howard, did you have a comment?
Actually, I was just going to ask when it's been used. I mean, the chief mentioned sort of maybe a stolen laptop, or those were the examples of when that you might go to the videotape. Is that sort of
I mean,
right?
so the two key times would be typically it's been petty theft, things like a laptop or something like that, and then occasionally people will come into the building who might have had a drink or two or three or four and violate the code of conduct in that way. And so again, it's important to us to be able to make sure that if we need to go in and sit down with someone, we can say, well, we watched you pull something out of your bag and take a drink or something like that. And again, it doesn't happen very often. I don't want to have people think that this is a highly representative example of behavior that takes place in the library, but it is an important thing for us to be able to monitor appropriately.
And are there signs, I believe there are signs up that
and
indicate that it's under surveillance?
Yes, and we're adding a new sign right at the entrance to let people know. We're updating our signage as part of the To Reimagine process, and we're adding a prominent sign right when you first walk in that talks about our food policy and also mentions that the building is under surveillance. So we want people to know. And again, we would love for them to not do the behaviors that would violate the code of conduct. We're not interested in catching people after the fact. We'd much rather let them know. I mean, we're not trying to hide the fact that there are cameras. We don't have big cameras, sticking down from the ceiling or anything. But yeah, we really want people not to exhibit the behavior that would require us to ask them to change the behavior. We would like for them to know this is not something you're going to get away with.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for Brett while we have him here? Okay, thank you. And then is there anybody else who'd like to speak to this ordinance? Oh, we're just going to say it. Okay, I'd like to bring it back to council then. Yeah, Ms. Krummeller?
I am glad to hear about the sign, because I never noticed, and I don't know what people's expectation is. I know even 5 years ago, you wouldn't expect necessarily to have cameras, and even in our building, I think I kept trying to I didn't know that this room was under surveillance other than during meetings, and I think we were all surprised by that when we found that out. I remember, like, nobody knew, and I think even on our building, I think we should have a sign. I mean, it's still...
Maybe that's one lesson to learn from this, is what look at.
Yeah,
what
I
the
mean,
appropriate
I
sign
was
is.
asking for a sign for this room because I wasn't really, I guess I did learn at some point that the hallways were monitored, but when you're sitting in this room and it's not a meeting going on, I don't think it's obvious that you're under, that you're under surveillance.
I believe the parking lot's under surveillance.
Yeah.
But
The parking lot's under
The
surveillance.
outside, I feel
too.
like the outside is different. Maybe others feel differently. I think there's an expectation outside that there's going to be security cameras outside on a parking lot, but
I think it's also true that most of Palmer Square and the merchants are under surveillance. I think if you go into any grocery store, it's under surveillance. I understand public buildings might be different, and I think we want to hold ourselves to a higher standard.
Yeah, I
But
agree, and
with the-
I'm not, I think it's fine that we have the cameras, but I would, and maybe maybe as time goes on, it's even less, but it seems like not everybody knows, and it might be just a courtesy to put up a sign.
I think a sign's fine.
Okay.
I have no problem with the sign.
Can I make one final comment? I'm not moved by the argument of having surveillance in the library to solve petty crime. For a stolen laptop, I think you weigh the surveillance in the library versus, the possibility that somebody's laptop disappears, and I still come down on the side of, I guess, privacy. And I'm not at all convinced that it wouldn't be operable if we've talked about the fact that the library is, all under surveillance. I don't know then how you go argue that to release the video would be to compromise your security system when we've told everybody that all these places are under surveillance. I mean, that is the current argument that you use against releasing this. And we've had we've had Oprah requests for surveillance tapes. So I'm not convinced by that argument, so I am going to continue to vote against it.
And then I just have a process question then, because this is a bond ordinance. We need 4 votes for this to pass. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, but this is an introduction tonight.
But I'm supporting it. I
don't think we have 4
Yeah,
votes.
you don't need the supermajority to introduce, only to adopt.
But we will need 4
We won't
votes
have
in
the 4
order for it
votes,
to pass
because they have to
eventually.
recuse, 2 recusals.
This is correct.
This is the full complement for this.
But I just want you to know that I don't share the same privacy concerns. I do have some concerns about the utility and the money, but I'll let that up. I'll leave it up to the library.
Okay.
What does that mean? I mean, we can introduce now, but that doesn't.
I don't.
Well, if we introduce it now, should we, that means that we can introduce it, but that the whole capital for the library is subject to 4 votes for approval on July 10th. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And there's no way to bifurcate it, the ordinance at this point?
You mean to pull out the cameras?
Look,
Could we-
I'm going to lose this vote no matter what. I don't intend to, I don't want to hold up capital improvements to the library. So why don't you go ahead and introduce it? I'll vote no.
You can vote no today, and then-
reconsider it on the public hearing.
Okay. All right, is there a
So moved.
motion to
Second.
introduce? It's been moved by Ms. Howard and seconded by Mr. Liverman. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Crummiller?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
No.
Okay, the ordinance has been introduced by a vote of 3 to 1, and the public hearing will be on July 10th, 2017. Next is...
Mayor, can I ask that we move number 7 up? If we can do that?
Yes, sure.
If we can move number 7.
I'm sorry, is
that
there
should
anybody
be-
else waiting
there-
for something else on the agenda, and we
That
can
should be
pop it up?
fairly easy.
Are you here for Carnahan Place or for something else? For number 9.
Number 9.
Okay,
If you
so
move 7 and
can
9.
I get, Mr. Liverman, will you
Yeah,
move
I'm-
moving up 7
yes,
and
I'm-
9?
Yeah, I make a motion that we move 7 and 9.
Okay.
Second.
All right, so there's a motion to amend the agenda to move up number 7 and 9 for the ordinance introductions.
Second.
It's been seconded already. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Jenny, you support
We
amending the
need
agenda? Okay.
Bernie.
Oh, right.
Well, we have a majority, even if
Well, they wanna go-
Yeah, I mean, it's, they're still welcome back into the meeting.
let's just keep going. Come on.
All right. So we voted to amend the agenda, just so you can follow along. So we're taking up the introductions for number 7 and 9 to be kinder to some of the residents who are here. So next is 2017-43, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton reestablishing 2-hour non-metered parking on the east side of Carnahan Place and amending the code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. And this is redoing a prior ordinance, so we're moving the parking back to where it originally was. And are there any questions or comments from council on this?
No, I just want to say that occurred was that we thought that it would be better to put the parking closer to the sidewalk, so we switched. And by switching, I guess we lost maybe 3 or 4 different spots. So some of the neighbors, I guess, took it upon themselves to say, well, can we have those 3 or 4 spots back? So we're switching back to the side that we were originally on. So everything is fine. I think folks are okay with it.
All right. Well, sometimes we try things and they work out great, and sometimes we try things
They work out.
and we're, we're open enough to change back. So thank you to the neighbors for their feedback. Any other comments or questions? Okay.
Has it been moved?
Not yet.
So moved.
It's been moved by Ms. Butler. Second. And seconded by Ms. Howard. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Yes. Ms. Crummiller?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
As the ordinance has been introduced and the public hearing for the ordinance will be on June 26, 2017. Next is ordinance 2017-45, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton adding personal services to the list of permitted uses in the S1 and S2 service districts, establishing off-street parking requirements for said uses, and amending Chapter 10B of the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. And the purpose of this ordinance is to increase the number of allowed uses in the S1 and S2, partly in response to what Mr. Zinder was advocating for in his initial public comment, and also by some comments we've gotten from businesses that we're hoping to open that are service businesses. So I think it was, given it was a service district, we wanted to make sure that service businesses were allowed in the service district. Are there any other questions or comments from council on this ordinance? Anybody?
So-
Okay.
So moved.
It's introduced by Ms.
Second.
Butler and seconded by Ms. Howard. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Yes. Ms. Crummiller?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
And the ordinance has been introduced, and the public hearing will be on June 26, 2017. And now we're going to resume our
four.
original order, I think with number 3, which is 2017-39, an ordinance authorizing Princeton to enter into a pocket park easement agreement with Avalon Princeton LLC pursuant to NJSA 40A 12-4. And this is for the corner park that's part of the Avalon Bay property that will be a public park. Are there any questions or comments from council?
I just want to say this park turned out to be much nicer than I thought it would be and more open to the neighboring community. I thought originally it was going to be in a little courtyard that would be sort of enclosed from the pictures. I just think it has turned out to be far nicer than I imagined from the plans, and I appreciate how open it is to the neighboring community.
Yeah, one suggestion that came up at an earlier meeting was to ask them about the signage on the park because although it is on an open corner, I don't think it's clear that it's publicly accessible.
Yeah, I think, and I don't think it's something that has to be incorporated into the easement itself, but it is definitely, I've already spoken to Ed Schmier. He's going to go back to them about that because I think it's a request that makes sense, and
Okay.
I'm sure they'll work with us on that.
Okay, terrific.
So moved.
Okay, moved by Ms. Butler, seconded by Ms. Howard. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Yes. Ms. Crummiller?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
And the ordinance has been introduced, and the public hearing will be on June 26, 2017. Next is 2017-40, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton to designate a handicap parking space within the Washington Oaks at Princeton Development on Brickhouse Road, and to amend the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Butler, seconded by Ms. Crummiller. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Yes. Ms. Crummiller?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
And the ordinance is introduced unanimously. The public hearing will be on June 26, 2017. Next ordinance is 2017-41, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton reducing the weight limit on Lover's Lane from 5 tons to 4 tons and amending the code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. Is there a motion to introduce?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Krummeller, seconded by Ms. Howard.
I have a question.
Question?
Yes, Deanna, what is the weight limit on Princeton Pike coming in?
Princeton Pike is 410.
Well, I didn't want to get into a discussion when the Olden people were here, but they also want a 4-ton limit on their street, right?
Well, I thought they just wanted the sign.
No, they
Both.
also want a 4-ton weight limit
Oh, and there is no 4-ton weight limit right now on theirs?
currently.
But you can't get to it theoretically, right? I mean,
Correct. Theoretically, you could not get to it because there are weight limits on the roads.
on all
leading
the
to it.
surrounding streets. So you know, the only way to get to it would be from Lovers or from Princeton Pike, and so it's already essentially a de facto 4-ton limit. Okay.
Any other discussion?
And who's going to monitor this, really? I mean, can you tell at a gallop the difference between a 4 and 5-ton truck, or are we going to be stopping people? What do you really think is going to happen here?
I don't know, but this was a recommendation for police to put this in place just to harmonize the ordinances.
Will this change, like, on GPS or anything? Will this take this off certain routes?
I think it will for the truckers. I think they have
No?
it. You don't think they
Well,
do
it
that?
wouldn't be it essentially wouldn't be that much different from what's already there. And we find that the truckers have to update their GPS if they're using an in-truck system. So they don't often have all of those weight limit restrictions already there. They are looking towards the signage that's in place for guidance.
Then where did this come from?
Like I said, it's from police, and I think it
Oh, it
may
is
be
from the-
related to something from a court proceeding.
Oh, okay.
I think it's already been, did somebody already introduce this? No.
No.
Somebody want to make a motion to
so
introduce?
moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Ms. Butler, seconded by Ms. Krummeller. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Ms. Crum-Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
And the ordinance has been introduced by unanimous vote, and the public hearing will be on June 26, 2017. Next is 2017-42, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton to establish no parking on the first and third Wednesday mornings of the month in the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood to accommodate street cleaning operations, and to amend the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and the Code of the Township of Princeton, 1968.
So moved.
It's been moved by Ms. Butler and seconded by Mr. Miller. Any questions or discussions on this ordinance? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Ms. Crum-Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ordinance has been introduced unanimously, and the public hearing will be on June 26, 2017. Next is 2017-44, an ordinance concerning sewer service charges and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968.
I'll move it.
It's been moved by Ms. Krummeller and seconded by Ms. Howard, and Ms. Webb is here. If anybody has any questions or comments on this ordinance.
I'll move it, or did I move it
think it's
already?
already been moved, so Madam,
Can we vote?
Only question would be, when was the last time these rates were increased?
Last year. Last year, unfortunately. What we saw this year, when we went through the analysis of where the rates were going to settle in at, we saw a lot of decline in the water usage, and that's been happening the last couple of years. I'm hoping that with some of the buildings that the university had under demolition in 2016, we back having some additional water usage, and hopefully we won't be going down the same path next year.
But we did, I mean, one of the things was that we learned when we waited 10 years, we had a big hike. So When we waited 10 years, it was a big problem, and so we learned our lesson and kind of pledged to do this do small increases more regularly.
Mr. Shield, did you have another comment?
I was just going to comment that it's an annual calculation that she does, so that just to see whether we need to do an increase or not. So that's done annually.
Thank you.
All right.
And we're all very happy that water usage is down, right?
Yeah.
Except for sewer purposes.
Is there a motion to introduce?
So moved.
It's been moved by Ms.
Second.
Krummeller
Oh.
and seconded by Mr. Miller. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Ms. Crummiller?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
And the ordinance has been introduced, and the public hearing will be on June 26, 2017. Next, we come to resolutions. First resolution is 17172, resolution authorizing a public sculpture license agreement for Avalon Princeton LLC for the installation of a sculpture on the Avalon property in the vicinity of the entrance to one of the Avalon buildings on Witherspoon Street.
I'll move it.
It's been moved by Ms.
Second.
Krummeller and seconded by Mr. Miller. Any discussion or questions? Anybody from the public? All in favor?
Aye.
Next is 17173, resolution authorizing federal aid Safe Routes to School grant agreement between New Jersey Department of Transportation and the municipality of Princeton for reimbursement of final design engineering services, fees not to exceed $45,464.72. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Miller and seconded by pretty much everybody, but I will say by Ms. Krummeller. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 17174, resolution authorizing a professional services agreement with Parsons Brinckerhoff Inc., now known as WSP USA Incorporated, in the not-to-exceed amount of $45,464.72, reimbursable through the NJDOT Design Assistance Pilot Program for final design engineering services related to pedestrian upgrades to traffic signals at Harrison Street, Hamilton Avenue, and Harrison Street at Franklin Avenue. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
It's been moved by Mr. Quinn
Second.
and seconded by Ms. Krummeller. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 17175, resolution authorizing a professional services agreement to F. Clifford Gibbons, Attorney at Law, LLC, to serve as a conflict counsel for the Princeton Zoning Board of Adjustment for 2017 for an hourly rate of $165. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Miller and seconded by Ms. Krummeller.
Can I ask a quick question? Why do we need this?
This is in case there's the attorneys conflicted, like we just saw with,
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 17176, resolution authorizing affordability loans, Washington Oaks at Princeton Sprinkler System for $9,609.48. Okay. Mr. DeShield, could you explain what this is for?
Yes, council.
You need your mic on, too.
If council will recall, council set up a program for the residents of Washington Oaks. There was a issue with the fire sprinkler system. We set up a program that would allow them to have their systems replaced and be able to take out a loan under the affordable housing program for that repair. The resolution before you is a resolution authorizing those people who wanted to participate in the program to enter into loans with the municipality.
So these are the affordable housing units, not all Washington Oak, just affordable housing units.
Just affordable housing.
I guess the title is the part of that threw me off. Washington Oaks at Princeton Sprinkler System. I understand what your explanation. I think the title is a bit confusing.
I think maybe if we could just add a comma, that might help. Would that help? A comma between Princeton and Sprinkler
Well,
System?
I kind of agree with Bernie when I'm reading this. I don't think at Princeton Sprinkler System is what we're trying to do here.
Well, Washington Oaks at Princeton, and then if comma. Oh, for
Four
sprinkler.
sprinklers, four sprinklers,
For
places-
sprinkler
yeah.
system, okay.
Maybe that's a little better.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, is there a motion to
So
approve?
moved.
Second. Moved by Mr. Liverman and seconded by Ms. Howard. And I want to thank the staff and Mr.
Yes.
Liverman and the Affordable Housing Board. I know this has been a ongoing, challenging
Yes.
problem, so I want to thank you for coming to a resolution.
thank you.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Resolution passes unanimously. Next, we come to the consent agenda, which contains items of a routine nature passed by a single vote. There any items on the consent agenda anybody would like removed? Seeing none.
I move we adopt them in block.
Okay.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Howard, seconded by Mr. Liverman. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda passes, and is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
It's been moved by Ms. Butler, seconded by Mr. Miller. All in favor?
Is it moved by the whole dais?
Moved by Ms. Butler on the step. She was
I got to ask you a quick question, though. I didn't get this. What were you saying about it's woof. The word is W-O-O-F. It's the expression.
But I actually think that's the wrong expression, too. I think it's woof and wolf, but I